It's been the Team Redline and Coanda showcase here in 2021 in the BMW Sim GT Cup, but we head to a track beloved by fans and drivers alike, and we begin thinking about hanging up the keys to the BMW M8 GTE. We started on the high banks of Daytona, journeying to the land of the rising sun as well as the home of British motorsport, but we now stop off in Brazelton, Georgia, and the Michelin Raceway Road Atlanta for the penultimate round in Season 1, the BMW Sim GT Cup. Hello and welcome back to RaceSpotTV and BMW Motorsports for continued coverage in virtual BMW competition. My name is Arjuna Kankipati, and alongside for today's action is Lewis McLeod, with TV cameras provided by Istvan Ballo and TrackCams22.com, and additional car cameras designed by RaceSpot's own Tyler Maxson. You can follow along with live timing and scoring by heading to racespot.wtf/BMW, where you can use Timing 71 and their world-class suite of data analysis tools to follow the best in virtual motorsport. Glad to be back at Road Atlanta, Lewis. We came here at the tail end of 2020 for the BMW Sim 120, and it was Finnish domination as Kova announced their arrival at the top echelons of sim racing. Today we return with a very interesting proposition. 2 more tickets on the line to Munich and December, and for the remaining cars in the top 5, they'll earn one final chance in the M8 to qualify for BMW Sim Live.
Penultimate round of the season. A fantastic season it has been in Season 1 here, but of course we've got to remember it has been all about Coanda, all about Team Redline, but now our focus heads to any of the other teams that can get themselves in the mix here. Qualifying this season has not been super important. First couple of races this season have been run from outside of the top 5. Can that continue here?
And just a reminder as well, the next round is a invitational only event. Let's talk a bit about this. We'll get back to the prizes at hand, but I love this format, Lewis. Last year it was only about the winners. It didn't really matter if you finished 2nd, 3rd, 4th or 5th. This year though, with the split season strategy, as we head to the Nürburgring for our final round of this Season 1 in this M8, we'll see 16 teams with one final opportunity to qualify, and I think that will be an all-out slugfest. Today, though, at Road Atlanta might not be so aggressive. The last time that we came here last year, fuel saving was very much the name of the game.
It's a tricky circuit as well. Survival will be a real aim for the drivers because there's a lot of corners around here that can catch you out, and getting inside that top 5 could be very, very important, of course, with that ticket in the next round, and it being invitational only. Team Redline are a part of it, of course, VRS Coanda as well, but keep your eyes on R8G Sports BS competition. They've also got a couple of cars into that final race of the season, but any other team now, if they want to really fight for it, sometimes it might help to have a couple of extra cars in the mix. So they're going to try and get themselves a top 5 today.
Let's take a look at some highlights from the last round at the home of British motorsports. It was Coanda and Redline once again doing battle out front. Joshua Rogers, Mitchell de Jong very much showing up with victory on their minds after contact between Rogers and Verstappen in the opening couple of rounds of this championship. There was more contact, you'll see, between Redline and Coanda, but at the end of the day, it was the duo of de Jong and Rogers able to hold on. Verstappen very much bullied around Silverstone, but at the end of the day, Lewis, he's got other duties to handle today. We may see him return later in this series.
They've got a couple of Team Red lines in the mix with the red and the blue car. But yeah, a bit of a shame for Verstappen, that dive from Ian Changuven down into T4. Saw battles up and down the order. BS competition were a part of it towards the back end of the top 10. It was a pretty tight tussle there. Urano Esports getting a bit of a slap. I think it was from Maniti. It was a crazy race up and down the order, and I get the feeling we're going to see the same thing today.
And here you can see it was a busy time in pit road. Basically everyone down at the same time. Here was MSI Esports trying to sling a move down the inside with the VRS Coanda number 18. And you also saw Stowe Corner proving to be a bit of a tricky handful for some of these M8 machines. It was more contact with Redline Red and Coanda. We've been saying that it's been those two teams at the front, and in qualifying right now as well. Just 3 minutes left on the clock. It is Joshua Rogers at the top of the timing sheet. His teammate Mitchell de Jong across the line. You can see Hyper Mac Backham as well. finishing off the race. Let's talk a little bit about this track that we're at, the Michelin Raceway Road Atlanta. Very much a driver's favorite, not just in the virtual world, but in Full Metal Motorsports as well, Lewis. It's a roller coaster of a track, and we don't have to deal with multi-class traffic today, but, you know, Petit Le Mans, that's the race that's made this track famous. Multi-class traffic with 3 different classes of competition. It's always a fun little ride.
It's a circuit which has been built in a handful of games and simulators over time. So from that point of view, all the virtual drivers are well equipped to tackle this 2.5 mile circuit. A fantastic racetrack. You're speaking of the S's, you're going downhill, you're hooking apexes, very, very tricky. Turn 5 at the top of the hill is a real mountain to climb, especially with the exit curb. And then you've got that long straight between turn 7 and that chicane. I think it's roughly 3/4 to 0.8 of a mile down there. It's a long straight into a really heavy braking zone. Means it's great for racing, and the high commitment circuit of Road Atlanta is definitely one that we'll see some hefty drivers throw their way around.
And of course, they've got the, what's the polite way of calling it, Lewis? The big boy, the big chungus, the BMW M8 GTE, the penultimate time this season, and we'll see it out on track.
Yeah, it's a driver which some drivers love, other drivers will be happy to get rid of. But we were speaking about this at Silverstone. There are some drivers and teams that really get along with this car, and some drivers that may not get along with their M4 that follows. It's more about getting the most out of this car on your final, realistically, your final guaranteed opportunity in it.
So this is the final public race. 2 splits of competition. And so we have 49 BMW M8s that are just finishing up qualifying with just over 70 seconds left on the clock. As mentioned, Joshua Rogers, perennially a very quick driver, at least in qualifying. 1.5 tenths clear of Alejandro Sanchez in the 474, with Jeremy Bouteloup, the Frenchman, rounding out the top 3 for VRS Coanda Cova. They announced their arrival. Not just in sim racing, but some of their drivers as well at the top level of sim racing here. One, who was it? Valtteri Alander, and I'm forgetting who the second driver was. Thomas Tattler has qualified that car, though, in the 707. Dane Warren makes it 3 VRS Coanda cars in the top 5. Before we get into the main action, one more look at the schedule. It's not just these trips to Munich that we need to talk about, Lewis. There's cash money on the line as well, $4,200 per event. And that means over the course of our 10 regular season races, $40,000 in prize money will be distributed on the iRacing service.
Yeah, it's a lot of money, and there are some teams and drivers that are coming into this. We'll talk about VRS Coanda, Josh Rogers, Mitchell de Jong. They've already got their ticket. They don't care about another ticket to Munich. They are aiming for one thing and one thing only, and that is top honours today to net them $1,200 each. They've not had the best season. They finished 3rd in the first 2 races of the season. They did win last time out, looking to go back-to-back and get the win here at Road Atlanta.
Just a reminder as well, you can stay in touch with us using the hashtag BMWSim. BMW Motorsport does tell you we are live now, so tune on in and let's get underway. And that means let's go trackside for the penultimate time this season and take a look at our starting grid here from the Michelin Raceway, Road Atlanta. And on pole, Joshua Rogers, a 1:14.360. He'll take us to the green flag, but alongside will be MSI Esports and Alejandro Sanchez. Jeremy Bouteloup on the inside of row number 2. He'll have Finnish superstar Thomas Tattler on his outside. Dane Warren, Maximilian Benecke. The VRS and Red Line show continues then on row number 3. As it's Jamie Fluke and the Apex Racing Team inside of row 4, alongside the Zebra and Phil Denez, a Road to Indy superstar, rounding out that row of the grid. Chris Lullum Lasse back on the edge of the top 10, with Ian Chan Guven jumping into this BMW M8 alongside Alexander Walters for the R8G Esports number 4. Iago Martinez with Zenith Esports, he'll line up in 13th position alongside Julian Sonnen in the R8G Esports Junior machine. Luca Kita for the German Fila Racing Team Euronics inside of row 8, with Daniel Pastor for Urano Esports Huawei Filip Matreski, and Quintin Violate, row 9 of this grid. Carlos Digas, Arthur Lehook on the outside of the top 20, with Vlad Kimichev and Rafael Razak, former teammates, I do believe, RHG Esports, P1 Esports, row 11. Kane Halliburton for Racecraft Esports alongside Andre Butcher in the Williams Esports Fanatic machine as the iRacing.com pace car begins to pull us around this 2.54 mile track. Nathan Lewis alongside Gerard Hendrickson with Bruno Spengler, who I do believe has won at this track in the past. He'll be racing for BS Competition. New dad as well, alongside Arturo Melgar for Urano Esports HP. United Sim Sports GT Valvoline, they'll be in 29th position. And it's a second United Sim Sports car rounding out the top 30. Nice healthy dose of cars here, Lewis. Let's get some predictions from you. VRS versus Coanda, that's been the name of the game so far. Do you think that will change here today?
I think VRS Coanda are going to take top honours again today. They did it last round. It was a fantastic race for them, naturally. We kind of expect that from VRS Coanda. They had a lot of pressure over the first couple of rounds, but they really came to it at Silverstone. For Josh Rogers, Mitch de Jong, remember this is a 4th pole position from Josh Rogers, so his conversion ratio is only 33% at the moment this season. I reckon that'll go to 50 today. However, those on the podium, let's not rule out MSI Esports, who are on that front row of the grid. Alejandro Sanchez qualified in 4th place as Suzuka, put on a fantastic display in the early stage of the race, and I reckon he's going to be putting pressure on the shoulders of Josh Rogers in the early stages.
I will say, by the way, Philip Stam is watching along. Philip, you forgot to submit your livery for Joshua Rogers, so that will be a purple and orange machine, I guess, instead of the black and red that usually adorns the Coanda cars now. Prediction, though, Lewis, I want a driver from you here. You say 50% conversion for Rogers. Does that mean that you think he can control this one? Because we did say it slightly earlier, fuel saving is going to be crucial at a track like this.
We know that he is good on fuel numbers. I reckon it is going to go the way of Josh Rogers, number 8, Mitch de Jong, alongside him in that car. But there is one car that I want to keep an eye on in this sort of top 10. That is in position number 6. That is Team Redline, who are currently qualified in 6th place. They've won before. Max Benecke starting the car, and we know he can be quite aggressive and will work his way up the order.
He's had to work his way up the order as well in the first couple of races here, but he's already punched his ticket to Munich, taking victory in the land of the rising sun, alongside teammate for today's race, Enzo Benito. 4 Redline drivers, 2 Coanda drivers have punched their ticket to Munich in December. Who will join them as we get underway here at the Michelin Raceway Road Atlanta? Already looks like a couple of cars have been forced off the track. I see Vlad Kimichev as well as one of the Williams Esports cars off the track. In through turn 1 we work side by side with VRS Coanda and MSI Esports. Alejandro Sanchez, I think, is going to have to concede the position for now. He gets off into the grass. Whoa! Contact with Warren. It's going to cause a chain reaction down through the S's. I think, fortunately, though, Lewis, that car, the VRS Coanda car, is stricken on the side of the track as we come flying our way down through turn 5 here.
Yeah, it was on the side of the track. Contact there. Dane Warren into the wall. Qualified in 3rd place last time out and did the work to get up into 2nd place in the early stages at Silverstone. This time out is his teammate Jeremy Bouteloup, who was doing the hard work to get himself up into 2nd. But look at this as we dive our way into the double right. We're focused on Williams Esports here in the middle of this chaotic battle pack.
That's the Williams Esports Razor car. Lasse back. Tucked up behind Luca Kita as we work our way down in towards the heavy braking zone at turn 10. Rogers leads 1 second clear of his teammate Jeremy Bouteloup, with Alejandro Sanchez in 3rd position. Benecke up a couple of positions on this opening lap as Rogers plunges down the hill to complete lap number 1 of an estimated 97 here in our 2-hour sprint to the end. Driver change will be mandatory, and I think we will start to see Rogers start to work on the fuel saving. Urano Esports off in the background through the final corner as back has to defend from Iago Martinez. Luca Kita's lost out a couple of positions here. We've got lots of replays, I think, to work our way through now, Lewis.
Yeah, chaotic opening salvo to the race from some drivers. A bit of a shame there for Dane Warren, but the other VRS Coanda contingent, obviously they're running 1 and 2 in this race. Ian Changuven has been firing his way up the order, qualified outside of the top 10, currently running now in 9th place as he's closing down on the BS competition drivers. It is taxing out there. Oh, on the start.
And it was a couple of cars, I think, trying to jump the start there, and I think Rafael Razak is in the P1 Esports, one of the biggest losers, but I wonder if Andre Butcher might be even bigger. Is that the RAG Cup? Oh, I can't even tell who all gets mixed up in this one, but LeHook goes through the alternate layout at turn 12 that you can take. Let's see if we can pick up what happened. I believe it's to Vlad Kimichev. There's a second of the RAG cars with the Williams number 3, Lewis, in all sorts of trouble.
Yeah, just sort of, like you say, trying to jump the start, trying to take advantage. Drivers coming into the pit lane as well. It was just chaotic, and it's one of those things that happens when you're just trying to fire it through. There's Alejandro Sanchez coming together with Dane Warren. So Sanchez had run fairly wide at the top of the hill at turn 2 and 3, and then basically as he's rejoined the circuit where there's a low amount of grip, the car is straight lined and it is heading in one direction only, straight into the side of Dane Warren.
He does a good thing, though, to hold there as the field streaks on past. In fact, backs that one up to avoid any sort of incident. Let's watch this one more time if we can. This is on board with Kane Halliburton down the hill. Well, he comes across the scene of the incident. One more look at the onboard, because I think this will give us a pretty good look at what happened here, Lewis.
Yeah, it's just trying to dive and dive. This is what happened, is when one person jumps, everyone jumps because they're reacting off the car directly ahead. And so by the time he's crested the hill, there's already cars at 90 degrees and you're committed at that point. There's almost nowhere to go. Real shame for some of the drivers to effectively be out of the running this early, because even if you qualify down the order, it does not rule you out. The car that we're on board with, when it won at Suzuka, it qualified down in 8th place. Earlier in the season, first round of the season at Daytona, did a little bit of a stat search on this one. BS Competition, the number 89, they got inside the top 5. We know how important that is when it comes to the next round. They started from 19th, went plus 14, and the same thing can happen today.
I would just want to point out here, I'm sure the YouTube chats are abound now, Lewis, with typical iRacing lap 1, etc., etc. Are people forgetting what happened at the start of the Daytona 24 just a couple of months ago, when the best in the real world got the start just as wrong as what we saw there? I mean, yes, that was chaotic, but always going to be more chaotic at a track like this, where you have that sort of a downhill run in towards the final corner. Cars still not yet up to racing speed as we now work single file down this back straightaway.
Yeah, we'll watch to see if Benecca can make a move on Sanchez. I don't think he will, but yeah, to your point, it's like you say, we've seen this before in sim racing a lot. Fair enough, it does happen. But we have seen this before time and time again in real life. I mean, even the best in the business will have you remember back at Mugello last year. They had that crash after the restart. It's in the real world, it can happen. Doesn't matter whether you're paid 40 million a year or whatever. It does happen, especially around here though. In sim racing terms, it's so hard, because if you're 30th, 40th on the grid, by the time that you want to start accelerating because you think the leader's gone, they've already come round the final corner because it's such a long run and such a big grid.
Ooh, Benecca very wide through turn 5. Lights flashing from Tattler behind and not able to make the run down into turn 6. Get back to strategy for just a few moments, as we're only 5 minutes into this race. When we came here at the end of 2020, it was Kova that took pole position, rocketed their way up to a lead, very much like what Rogers is doing now. The gap between Rogers and Booterloop is up to 2.1 seconds, and then controlled the fuel-saving game, because a track like this, Lewis, it is short in nature, and while you might think, I think that's, ooh yes, red line blue down the inside of Tattler, the Finnish driver will give that one up and slide his way down into 6th, but at a track like this where you're actually full throttle for much more of the lap than you might anticipate, you sometimes struggle to do the full hour on fuel, so making sure that you get to the conclusion of 60 minutes and hand it over to your teammate to take you to the end of the race is much more crucial than we've seen in earlier races in this season.
Yeah, fuel saving is going to be critical around here. It's, like you say, it's such a fast circuit, but the thing is, because it's such a short circuit, it's actually, in a sense, easier to save a lap of fuel, because a lap of fuel isn't actually like that much in comparison to, say, for example, if you're trying to save a lap at Bathurst or somewhere like that, or even Silverstone last round out, where the track is basically twice the length. And so in this sense, it's a bit easier for them to try and save fuel. And if you're sat in that train, as much as you're not making the progress that you want, you can save a little bit of fuel. That's what we saw out of Kova there with Tattler going down into that chicane, because Lulham got through because Kova was saving fuel, which that's a strategy to work your way up the order, but you'll have an invoice to pay later in the stint. That's not fuel that's going to magic its way out of nowhere. So for that Redline car that's going quite aggressive at the moment, the Team Redline Blue, they may be in a little bit of trouble a bit later on.
Well, you're telling me, Lewis, you haven't figured out the secrets of the fuel-growing tree that magically appears in your car? Some of these drivers, it sometimes does seem like that, I must say. On board, we ride with Jamie Fluke, the Irishman for the Apex Racing team. I'm sure it's a pretty nice celebration right now for the Apex Racing team. Their real-life counterpart, Scott McLaughlin, who has competed with ART on occasion over the past couple of years. Big sim racer as well as Scotty Mack. Second place yesterday behind his compatriot Scott Dixon at the Texas Motor Speedway. What a debut on the ovals for the young New Zealander, and I'm sure a prospect in IndyCar racing for years to come. I wonder if we'll see him in action this coming summer in potentially some iRacing competition as well, but very focused on his debut campaign. His teammate now sees someone who wants to join McLaughlin in the NTT IndyCar Series. Phil Denez, Road to Indy superstar, now driving for the BS competition Zebras. But this is where fuel saving comes in to the name of the game. These cars on the edge of the top 10. Ayan Guven, another real-world driver, tucked up behind the Zebra and very much content to ride around as things stand. The top 10 separated by 5 seconds, Lewis, and we are starting to see the group for Bieler Racing Team on back losing track of this leading group of cars.
Yeah, it's kind of easy to do when you're focused on the cars behind and stuff as well, like what Bieler Racing will be at present, because they've got a lot of pressure from R8G directly behind and Zenith Esports as well. So they're focused on that scenario, so less so on the fuel numbers. At the moment, the easiest position to be in at present would be the likes of being in 10th place and being Williams Esports Razor, because they're sat there in a line of cars, and at the moment they're content on just saving fuel. Lasse back behind the wheel, who we're riding on board with now, rising up and over the crest at the exit of the S's. Just save fuel at the moment, and you'll watch them when they come down into the chicane. You'll see that Ayan Guven lifts quite a bit. The car that we're on board with lifts even more, because they know that they can catch it up through the braking zone, and you catch it in the slipstream and whatnot. It's so much easier in this position because you're just keeping your eye on the fuel.
But talking about fuel, look at the damage on the front clip of this car. I mean, chaotic start to this race to say the very least, I think, and we'll try and get some more replays at the end of the broadcast and try and just ascertain exactly what happened there. But even minor damage like that, Lewis, will just affect your aerodynamic performance. Might mean that in the case of Lasse Back and his teammate Josh Thompson later on in today's race, a fuel saving might just be a bit more of a cognizant factor that they have to have at the forefront of their minds.
Yeah, I wonder if there's a couple of other drivers that have got a little bit of damage from obviously that earlier race contact that we saw at the top of the hill just here. Obviously MSI Esports, Sanchez was the one that made contact with Damore, and I'm pretty sure that he's going to have a little bit of damage on the front of his car. Ayan Guven's car's not looking super duper strong either, so a few of the teams not in an ideal circumstance.
Well, I tell you what, let's jump through some of these cars. I wonder if that's actually just how the bodywork looks here, Lewis, because...
No, we're going to come out as a professional on this. It's fine. They're all broken.
Are they all... Oh, now I'm going to break out the Lando Norris quote. Well, if Joshua Rogers has those telltale dimples, if you will, on the front end of the car, I would suspect... just suspect that things are okay. Trying to grab a better camera view if we can, but I don't know, Lewis. That definitely doesn't look like that's normal.
Yeah, so I'm looking elsewhere as well, towards looking more of a head-on towards front of the car. And I will tell you, I'm assuming most of this is actually down to curbing and stuff over at the likes of T5. Because if you look particularly to the front right of basically any car, and there is damage on pretty much everyone, including race leader Josh Rogers.
I tell you what, let's jump on board with Tattler for a lap here. Up the hill in towards turn 3. Blind braking zone. Turn in when you feel comfortable. Use all of the curb on the inside to rotate yourself down in through the S's, where you could really sling the car at full speed. 250 in the braking zone. Just before the curb on the right-hand side, slow your car down slightly, and there you'll see. That's the track usage that Lewis was referring to. Chris Lullum in the red line blue, number 20, all over the curb and potentially incurring some more damage. Important turn 7 here. Turn 6 is cambered in, so you can carry some more speed, but turn 7 slightly off camber. And of course, that long run down. First up the hill underneath the Motul Bridge, but in towards turn 10A and the very tricky braking zone where fuel saving seems to be important. Listen to the engine from Tatala as well. Where is he lifting off roughly? And you can hear all the way at the 300 onto the clutch as well. And that is the best fuel saving that you can do. There's no games being done with fuel maps, no short shifting, Lewis. On the iRacing service, at the end of the day, it's all about the driver and what they do with their feet.
Yeah, the clutch in. So this is I did a little bit of research on this. The clutching in isn't necessarily itself directly about fuel saving, because in this sense, if you clutch it, it actually doesn't save you any fuel. What it does do, as far as I'm aware of, what it does do though is it doesn't slow you down as much, which means that if you clutch in quite early, obviously you don't slow down enough, which means that you can lift off earlier, clutch in, and your speed remains. It just doesn't slow down enough. The engine braking doesn't get involved in any way, shape or form. And so in that sense, you do save fuel if you're good with it. You've just got to be careful, because when you've got the clutch in, for anyone who's driven around, you just have to play about, you stick the clutch in, whatever, the car can be really quite unstable in the wrong zone. Speaking of instability.
This was, I believe, on lap 1 or lap 2 of this race. You can see just how congested it was, indicates that it was early. Jesse Stevens, a bit of a tank slapper, holds on very nicely, I must say, over the crest of the hill. Couple of replays I do want to take a look at from the start. United Simsport, Moses Caraballo, too much speed in through turn 6. That's the camber that I was referring to just a few moments ago. Caraballo on lap 2 trying to just make advantage. Ooh, close with R8G. And then a second United Simsports car. This is Alfie Rigby off the road at turn 1. Can he hang on to this one, Lewis? I think he just about manages to do so.
Yeah, I think just about, and rejoins quite nicely as well, just on the outside here. So, I mean, that's an easy mistake to make. Then you're just trying to dodge the wall. Obviously, you're carrying so much speed through T1, and then rejoining here, just going to try and get back onto the racing line and slot a gap ahead of someone. More carnage. Oh, that's a bit of a contact there.
And that was Williams, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was one of the Williams cars, the Fanatec one.
Maybe that's Andre Butcher just aggressively trying to make up for that earlier contact that he had. He's already down on pit road and retired. Here's the Bustamante. Very clever team name there as Juan Bustamante goes for a bit of a rallycross excursion through the grass and wonderfully held on there in the 25 car and, just about, I think, slots back into line, holds on to 32nd position. Moses Caraballo has had a second off, unless I am seeing things.
Oh, no.
And it's at the same corner as well.
It's so easy to do. Again, high commitment. Oh, that's not good, though. That is not good.
Has it worked out? It's just about worked out. Okay, he must have been heart in his mouth there for a moment. Take a look at the onboard, Lewis, because, well, first he made the mistake, and then he almost did a Kimi Räikkönen down in Brazil a couple of years ago.
I did not think, at this point, I would be assuming that I'm about to fall off the planet on the exit of the track. How? I never knew that. There was a second tyre barrier there. That is both lucky and yeah, kind of genius, to be honest.
Well, we're going to have to jump back to something. Ooh, it's contact between Jamie Fluke and the BES competition Zebra. That's a bit naughty, and Fluke ends up in the tyre barrier. That will be significant damage. And, well, when we came to Road Atlanta last in BMW Sim GT competition, it was Team RLL partnered up with the Apex Racing team, and both Jamie Fluke, Antoine Heglen in the Apex Racing team car, and Kevin Ellison, Zach Campbell in the RLL machine, ended their day very similarly. Jump back to live coverage, though, and let's pick up the leading group of cars as they work their way in through turn 10A and 10B. The gap between Rogers and MSI Esports is up to 2.2 seconds. There may have been a bit of a switch around under replay there, Lewis, because Jeremy Bouteloup down out of the podium positions.
Yeah, I think it was down at the final corner. It was really, really tight as Benecke was coming through. Not 100% saw, only saw out of the corner of my eye ever so slightly. But yeah, a little bit of a change. Not sure if MSI Esports with Sanchez opened the door for Benecke to come through. But either way, yeah, Boothloop's moved down a couple of positions, which is kind of what Josh Rogers did not want, because now he knows that that gap is going to be aggressively, potentially aggressively cut down. Whereas if it's your teammate behind, you can kind of control things a little bit better. But for Sanchez now, it's about what Beneca does more in a sense to the Spaniard, because we know that Sanchez is fast and potentially he'll be able to close that down, that gap. But if Beneca fights him, no chance, absolutely no chance.
And I think we're in a bit of a weird position, given what we were talking about earlier with the fact that sometimes it can be difficult to go the full hour on fuel at a track like this. What we haven't necessarily talked about is the weather conditions down the hill. Beneca all over the rear end of Sanchez. Wonderful look at a camera mounted at the inside curb through the final corner. Very warm track conditions, only 19 degrees in the air as we work roughly 1 p.m. in the virtual Brazelton, Georgia, but 41 degrees track temperature, Lewis. And, you know, given that we saw an iRacing update a couple of weeks ago, just before that Silverstone round, that doubled the tire wear, for someone like Josh Rogers, it'll be interesting to see what he does with his teammate in the pit cycle.
I was going to say, yeah, because the first couple of rounds of the season, basically across the entire 2-hour race, drivers would take a single set of tyres and they would run the entire set. So whoever jumps in at the halfway point, sorry lad, but you're going onto some worn boots on your car. In this sense, though, with it being quite aggressive on the tyre wear, we do expect them obviously to take tyres on the pit stop. Around here, like, yeah, especially with that heat, I think things could become very, very interesting towards the end of the stint. For Josh Rogers, who's currently driving his own line, it's fine. For everyone else who's having to drive offline to make overtakes, to be aggressive, things become a bit more interesting. Focused on Max Beneca, and you can see Boutaloop behind, who may not be too impressed with how he was overtaken by the pair of them, and might be a little bit angry himself to try and fire his way back through. Not necessarily that Boutaloop's a particularly aggressive driver, but he is there or thereabouts to sort of jump in. The interesting thing in that sort of top lot, though, is that Kova are dropping backwards quite quickly.
Switch around as I believe United Simsport getting down the inside of No Name Racing in the 14. You are right. The gap between Kova and the 81 over 1 second now is the left-hand side of the screen. You can track the intervals between each of the cars now rather than the gap to the leader. Dane Warren, by the way, down on pit road. Day done for him. Didn't start well, obviously, coming through turn 3. Contact with Alejandro Sanchez. And we should say as well, Lewis, that these race results and what we can talk about in today's action, it's all unofficial. BMW Motorsports and their crack team of race control officials will review this race and hand down any penalties as need be, and that might affect the points-paying situations when it comes to both the trip to Munich and the finale in just a couple of weeks' time.
One of those things that we kind of need in sim racing a little bit more, especially when it comes to races with prize money and stuff on the line. You can't just have the drivers basically drive around as cleanly as they want around everyone else, because there's prize money on the line. Things will potentially happen, so you need that race direction just to control things a little bit more and apply a penalty where it is justly deserved. And we've seen it happen a few times this season, but you know, hopefully it doesn't get involved too much. I think for the most part we've seen some fairly clean racing. Silverstone had a little bit of some dodgy moments and whatnot. Of course, remember back to Suzuka when we saw that crash between Max Verstappen and Josh Rogers going down into turn 1 at the high speed. That was probably the most high-profile incident we've had all season. From those two battling for the race lead. It was a fantastic battle. But yeah, sometimes race control just need to step in, just need to give drivers a bit of a slap on the wrist, and then we all get cleaner as a group.
I mean, Verstappen and Rogers are getting very much acquainted with one another at this point in time. Check in with social media. Who would have thought Joshua Rogers on pole? Well, if you are a betting man, you probably could have made some decent money, although I don't think you would have got some good odds. Question is, will it be lights to flag for the Australian? His teammate Mitchell de Jong will be standing by to take over in the number 8. They now lead by 2 seconds from the MSI Esports 474. I should also say, by the way, Coanda Simsport, not sure if that's going to... Oh, yes, it does. There you can see brand new logo for the Coanda Simsport outfit there, Lewis. Not sure what you think about it, but definitely as we wrap up a World Championship era, Joshua Rogers now reclaiming his World Championship throne, a new step forward for the Coanda Simsport team.
I mean, let's be honest, when it comes to Coanda, when it comes to liveries and whatnot over the last few years, they've always put on great liveries, and their social media is always, it's full of great stuff. And so when it comes to if they're going to go for a minor rebrand and whatnot, I'm very curious to see what comes of it, even if it's just like a couple of logos changing here and there, and maybe even some slight details changed on the cars. Always excited to see what happens next, as long as we can recognise them from a mile away, because otherwise we'll be not very good at what we're doing. I mean, it's interesting to see them changing a logo. Not too many teams that are toward the top change their logos, to be honest, ever, really. You kind of keep the same brand, because that is your identity, isn't it?
Well, I tell you what, I mean, we're taking a look, I think, at the new generation of Coanda liveries, the purple and orange.
Perfect.
No, it's just the team forgot to submit the livery for the broadcast. Reminder, by the way, as well, I think I saw conversation in the RaceSpotTV YouTube chat. RaceSpot.media, your home for all things livery on RaceSpotTV broadcasts. And if you're ever in doubt as to whether you'll make it onto a broadcasted split, whether it be here in the BMW Sim GT Cup, in our iRacing special events powered by VCO, or even the Creventic Endurance Series. Lots and lots of official public broadcasts that we'll get to watch throughout the next couple of months in the upcoming summer, and you can always make sure that you are ready for your team to be a part of the action. Take a look at some more social media comments. BS Competition and the Zebras. Best placed Zebra, Phil Denez, not going to get a Christmas card, I would think, from the Apex Racing team, but we've got Nathan Lewis in 17th and Bruno Spengler right behind in 18th position. Watch for the Zebras to work their way up through the field. And I must say, you don't get a look at the wonderful screenshot that BMW Motorsports has put on Twitter, Lewis, but Carbon Carnage, I think that alliteration well describes what we saw on lap 1 here today.
It certainly does. It was a little bit of a chaotic affair. By the way, speaking of BS Competition, they're about to be overtaken for a second time. They just got passed by VRS Coanda, and now they've been passed into T1 by Williams Esports Razor. A couple of positions dropped. I don't think Phil Denez is going to be worried at present. Again, a bit of fuel saving and potentially just a little bit too much open the door for VRS Coanda to go through. And we know that Ian Changuven is trying to march his way forward, and Lasserbach did not need a second invitation at turn 1 and got his way through 2 pretty easy moves from what I caught out of the corner of my eye. But just dropping back a couple of positions, maybe into the Bila Racing team as well. They're not very far behind of that train. We know that Ian Changuven's pretty fast, so again, if I'm part of this train, I'm not worried right now. As long as I can see my targets, even if they're quite far in the distance, as long as I can see them right now, I am okay.
And I think that's the way that if you're any of the top 15, basically, you're thinking about this race right now. Anything can happen in the pit stop cycles. Oh, we're not even halfway through the first stint of this race. I mean, think about potential speeding penalties. It's a tricky entry onto pit road as well. You can see the dotted line on the right side there, plunging down the hill underneath the Michelin bridge. Across the start-finish line as well. I think Lasserbach might be trying to close onto the back of Guven and follow him forward. Try and check in with the Apex Racing team. Bundled off the road just a couple of laps ago. They're now past Quintin Violate in the R8G Junior number 12. And on the edge of the top 30, it's Jamie Fluke in 27th position. A bit weird to talk about Jamie Fluke in that position. Even weirder, if you ask me, to talk about Johan Harth in that position, the iRacing Rallycross World Champion. A couple of weeks ago was in action in the IRX All-Star Invitational presented by Yokohama, round 1. Harth taking victory there, also securing his World Championship license for 1 more year on the road side of things. It's been a busy week for the Apex Racing team, but at the end of the day, it's always just a little bit of fun for them as we kick off the off-season in World Championship competition. Talking about then the trip to Munich, though, because Joshua Rogers leads the way still here in Michelin Raceway Road, Atlanta, Lewis. We might be looking at MSI Esports in the driver's seat for those 2 tickets to December.
Yeah, reminder again that the ticket, if it's not taken by the race winner, it's then passed down to the next team that doesn't have a ticket. Now, in this sense, Tickets are going out at present to Team Redline Blue, to Team Redline Red, I think it was. So that is Beneke, Benito, Vecchio and Jonas Wallmeyer from the first couple of races. In the last race, it was, of course, VRS Coanda, Mitchell de Jong, Josh Rogers with those tickets. So those are the ones that have it at present. But if you're the MSI Esports 120 car, you're currently in a really good spot, because if the 8 wins, you still get your tickets. All well and good. Also, again, if that number 1 Team Redline car behind you passes and it was to finish in that way, so you're still third, sure, you get a bit less prize money, but you still get that ticket, and that is where things become quite important for this position. That in this scenario, if that's what you're aiming for, if it's not just prize money, it's mainly that ticket, which is naturally what most people are aiming for here, then understanding the full picture is really important.
Cooper Allen around in through turn 3. This is in danger, in fact, of coming just in front of the race leaders. Take a look at the RaceSpotTV replay if we can. All by himself. Tail end steps around. We might see that, I think, later and later in this run as well, as the tires burn off. Drivers push harder and harder. Back to live pictures. Let's Gump and pick up the battle out front once more. If you're wondering, by the way, why the VRS Coanda car maybe doesn't look like it was intended to be designed like that, well, you'd be right. It was not. I'm going to give you a guess here, Lewis. Can you guess what livery the Coanda team submitted for their M8? Because I'll give you a hint. It's not even a GTE machine.
P2.
It is a P2. Did you know that already, though?
No, I actually didn't. But I remember, didn't this happen before?
It did happen before. I was trying to remember if I'd already secretly told you that one or not.
No, it's happened before. I guess it's an easy mistake to make. Maybe this is part of the rebrand. From a distance, though, because it's red on one side and white on the other, I almost think it's a BS competition car.
You know, if the iLiveries team wants to take some inspirations, maybe accidental inspirations, but nevertheless, I'm sure maybe Juan can find something to do with that car. So
it's a bit like a red line as well, though. If you look at it from one side, it does look like the red line directly ahead of it.
You have to look at it from the right side, though, because the white and black on the left, I don't know what you describe that as, but nondescript. Maybe that's the best I can do.
I have made that mistake before. I think actually once the best one back in the day was if you're doing it in a simulator which requires DDS files, and you save it without, I think it's without nipmaps activated or whatever, and then you turn down the game quality, things can look very interesting. You get a car with loads of stripes in it. It's very bizarre. So easy mistake to make.
Well, if you like stripes, I think that sounds pretty good. And let's give a bit of a shout out. You can see some wonderful paints. MSI, Redline, Coanda, even the Kova team behind them as well. Identity and custom branding, such a big part of the iRacing service. The mailbox, what would happen if I were to put a Ford NASCAR scheme on a BMW? Well, taking a look at the entry list, I don't see Team Fordzilla, but it has become very normal to talk about Team Fordzilla in anything but a Ford now, Lewis.
I once commentated on them or once saw them racing in a race where they had to race in a very specific car because it had a Ford engine in it. And that's about as close as I've seen them being forced to enter in an actual kind of Ford. Most of the time we do see them in other stuff, and that's for various reasons, be it not having Fords available in whatever series it is, but I mean, it's an interesting one. I did see them in their liveries for an upcoming race elsewhere in sim racing in some Cupras, where they had quite a brave call that was instantly denied of putting "powered by Ford" on the side of a coupe. Not a good. That did not go down very well, but still, good effort. Good effort.
Yeah, I'm sure that went down like a bag of bricks with the organisers. I will just say, by the way, we've been talking about sim racing and so much for the opening part of this race. Let's talk a bit about the M8 GTE. The penultimate time we'll see it as there goes the Williams Razor team down the inside of Ian Chan Guven into the chicane. The green, black, and blue, I guess you would call it, number 42, down the hill. 2.2 seconds behind Chris Lullum in 6th position. These guys really do have to get the bit between their teeth and try and close that gap up as we enter into the pit stop cycle. But you know, a twin-turbo V8 car, almost 5 meters in length, 1,250 kilos with 600 brake horsepower, give or take. It's an interesting car, sometimes much maligned. Has won 2 24-hour of Daytona victories, 2019 and 2020. And of course, last year in what was a very mixed up schedule for the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship, 2 different visits to the Michelin Raceway Road Atlanta. Well, in the 6-hour race, the BMW M8 did take victory at the interestingly named TireRack.com Grand Prix at Road Atlanta. Connor De Filippi, and guess who? Bruno Spengler taking victory there, Lewis.
New Papa as well, isn't he?
He
Bruno
is
Spengler.
indeed.
We had that announced last week, midway through the Nürburgring 24. So massive congratulations, of course, and we know he's a very talented driver. I'm glad to see him taking on sim racing quite as much as he is, because I feel like most races that we're commentating on these days, we've got Bruno Spengler in, and I like that sort of just constantly throwing himself at it.
And it's always nice when you don't start to think about these guys as real racing drivers, right? Spengler is so ingrained in the BS competition team at this point in time, alongside competitors like Phil Denez, etc., etc. Like you say, it's just something normal in the BMW bank car. That's what we see him in when, partnered up with the BMW Motorsports operation as well. It's wonderful that you see these drivers that really embrace sim racing. Guven as well. He was in World Championship competition just a week ago, Lewis. I love it when you see the top level of real-world superstars coming into the virtual world and trying to compete against some of our best, because what sometimes I think is off-putting to real-world drivers coming into sim racing is just how much practice it can sometimes take to learn the intricacies of sim racing. People like Guven, people like Spengler, they love that. They relish the challenge of always trying to go faster and faster.
I said it when we did the race last week, of how there's a different approach, obviously, in real-world motorsport than is in sim racing, and that's not just from the fact of doing things in the real world and doing things on a computer. It's in the sense of like you say, the practice, the build-up, and using examples of other people in racing and whatnot, and particularly in endurance racing where you're sharing the car with a few people. You only get a couple of practice sessions that are maybe an hour long a piece going into an endurance race, and in a sense what that means is you get maybe 15 or 20 laps in the car on the track before you go into qualifying in the race, and that is quite hard work. And in sim racing, that's imagine being told you're going to do this race, you only get 15 laps. Most people in sim racing will be like, sorry, what? As we see a pass RHG Junior to the inside of the no-name racing team. A pretty simple move there at T1. But yeah, that kind of approach is very, very different. And like I say, it's a daunting task for some drivers from real-world racing to come in and have to put that time and effort into sim racing. But some enjoy it, some don't. Some come in and are fast regardless of practice, so who knows. I just like seeing more of them in it, because it gives you as sim racers that sort of chance to take on a real world icon and potentially beat them, and then you can brag about it on Twitter or something like everyone else does.
Well, and I think that's why the VCR Pro Sim series was something that I think the drivers really enjoyed, because it allowed them to compete against people of similar skills and practice time as well, rather than throwing them out there to the wolves in the sim racing professionals, because it is definitely something that you have to think about. The famous story always that I break out here is Brian Lockwood, who of course last year, as we were beginning our World Championship campaign, very famously said 60 hours of practice for just one race. That is an insane full work week, and even more in fact if you add in some overtime there. And of course for so many of these sim races as well, right, Lewis? We've seen, for example, Joshua Rogers balancing World Championship commitments, wanting to compete here in the BMW Sim GT Cup. VRS, of course, always have their own work for their teachers and coaches to have available for them to do. So it's a busy time for some of these racers, and they've got so many priorities to always make sure they're on top of.
Yeah, I think most of sim racing works in a sort of weekly or fortnightly sense. Obviously there are certain series exceptions like this one, but most of it is kind of fortnightly. So you're doing a race every other week, and in that sense you can fit 60 hours in. Okay, sure. But if you want to know why you see a lot of sim racers who only do 1 or 2 series at a given time, so over that sort of fortnightly period, they'll only do 1 or 2 series, 1 or 2 races realistically, that is why, is because the amount of time and effort that's put into it, you just don't really have time to focus on anything else, and also then you get burnout and whatnot, and yeah, you need your time to sort of focus on the one series and whatnot. I don't know about you, what's the most practice, I guess in laps is probably the easiest way of putting it, what's the most practice you've put into one race?
Oh, no, I don't think I can do it in laps, I'll be honest here, Lewis.
Oh, really?
I think, and I'm having to rack my memory here, I would say when I was competing in private endurance championships about a couple of years ago. Ooh, Kova by themselves! No. Coming through turn 7, contact with the Williams Esports Razor machine. Ayan Guven will slip it down the inside. We'll have to revisit this topic. The race winners the last time the SimGT Cup came to Brazelton, Georgia, lost it by themselves, and now side by side with Guven, using the draft as maybe 3 wide. No. Lasse back says, no thank you, not for now. BS Competition takes advantage. Almost contact between Kova and Lasse back, but there was a close moment there. And it was all by himself for Thomas Tattel. Let's go straight to the RaceSpotTV replay, Lewis.
I think, if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure he overdoes it ever so slightly and might just tap the commander ahead. Oh, he's over, oh, right, on the curb. So he overcooked it a little bit. He was also on the curb. And the moment that you try slowing it down, the curbs are quite bumpy, they're quite rigid, and you bounce quite a lot. And you'll just see the rear end just overtakes it. He was in way too hot as well, so applying more brake pressure. And the rear just overtakes the front. Was lucky to keep it going. And this whole race section afterwards, little bit dicey and could have ended in tears.
Yeah, I want to take one more look at this one, and the, let's call it sturdy defense from Lasse back here all the way to the inside as Tattler ducks. Oh, a bit of a wiggle there as well. I'm not sure if there was contact between the two of them. You can see how close Tattler left it under the braking. Jump back to the live coverage and see what they're doing, because back down this back straightaway they come. I don't think they'll be close enough for any type of a move this time around, but the main result is that 5th on forward now, Lewis. They're separated by the 6th chasing pack behind. 4 seconds between 5th and 6th right now.
Yeah, which is great for anyone sort of towards the back of that train, because they can attack with no worry about what's happening behind. Also in all of that, by the way, Phil Denez did also get by Ayan Guven, as Guven was the purple, the commander that was on the right-hand side that was being passed by everyone, basically just freight train into the chicane, also backed out of it a little bit when there was contact ahead. But Phil Denez gained a position in that scenario, so good for him, just taking advantage of the opportunity ahead and now focused on the Kova car, which he knows might be in a little bit of trouble. Obviously, when you've overheated your tyres like that in a sort of awkward half spin like that, it's very easy to make the same mistake again. Now we've passed a couple of laps, I'm sure the temperature will be back down a little bit, but it's just so easy to sort of fall into that same level of mistake.
And, you know, it's just a mental slip-up as well. I think it was the slightest of touches in the grass with the left side tires kind of spat him around, and Jeremy Bootsloop will be very, very lucky that he got away with that one as well, because Tattler, who knows, it could have been further contact between the 707 and the group of cars in front. Checking back out front, by the way, the gap has been holding relatively constant. One of sim racing's finest, controlling the action from the start so far. He'll be handing over to his teammate in just about 20 minutes time, and Mitchell de Jong will look to try and take a 2nd consecutive victory here in the BMW Sim GT Cup. But ticket to Munich currently in the hands of Alejandro Sanchez and MSI Esports. Maximilian Benecke proving to be the buffer between Sanchez and Bootsloop, once more running wide through turn number 5.
Sanchez will be handing over to Salva Talens, who so we were kind of expecting to not do so well back at Suzuka, I think. Not do so well is probably like a really harsh way of putting it, but Alejandro Sanchez got up into 2nd position and was looking really, really strong. Passed over Salva Talens, who, if I remember correctly, struggled over the first couple of laps, but then pace-wise leveled out and was right on the money. They ended up finishing right up there that day. It was 2nd place for them, so looking for another 2nd place this season. Only this time the car ahead does already have that ticket. I was going to say, this is where it's for the likes of Josh Rogers, right? This is why Josh Rogers and Mitchell de Jong team up all the time, because Josh knows in this scenario that he can control this as much as he wants. And he knows that when he gets out of the car and hands over to Mitchell de Jong is as fast as he is in this sense, and so will either keep that gap or maybe even extend it or whatever, but he doesn't have the fear of handing over to a driver that might be 3 or 4 tenths slower, or even more so in some cases. So that just sort of alleviates any pressure on Josh Rogers' shoulders. Although, watching that gap, it did just come down from 2 seconds to 1.6 to Alejandro Sanchez. So Sanchez firing up the pace a little bit towards the end of the stint, it seems.
Yeah, that's what I had just noticed as well. Almost 1.5 as we work our way through turn 7, back onto the back straightaway here. As MSI, who were very, very strong, I must remember, at Daytona at the start of the year, not just in the Sim Cup, but in the first of our iRacing special events as well. They were looking like very much being contenders for victory there until things maybe came apart in the closing stages of the race. I think Sanchez maybe a bit deep under the braking there. You saw a puff of smoke as they kicked up some gravel, just cutting the inside of that chicane. And at the line, what was the lap time difference? Joshua Rogers must have made a mistake through turn 1, because it's almost 4 tenths of a difference between 474 and the number 8 car, Lewis.
Yeah, I'm just going to read out the last 4 laps between the two of them. For Sanchez, it's been a 15.4, a 15.4, a 15.3 and a 15.3. For Rogers, a 15.6, a 15.5, a 15.5 and a 15.7. All of those laps are in fact slower. So Sanchez seems to be finding the grip in the car at the moment. Maybe somehow, whilst defending as well, has been looking after the tyres. If not, maybe Josh Rogers has found that he's quite close on fuel to going an extra lap in a sense. And it's like, okay, if I save a little bit more here, I can extend it just that touch further. Maybe he's not hitting his numbers accurately enough, and Sanchez isn't really bothered about numbers at this point. He's just bothered about the show. And so, yeah, I'm not sure what's going on. Either way, regardless of all of the potentials in the scenario, the facts are that MSI Esports, the 474 car, is closing in.
I was also seeing, by the way, Kova very much all over the tail end of Lasse back. A gap between 5th and 6th, now up to 4.6 seconds. So these guys not necessarily squabbling wheel to wheel, but still costing each other valuable lap time as they try and catch up to the top 5 and at least gain a position in our season finale from the Nürburgring in a couple of weeks' time. This is the final public race in the BMW Sim GT Cup Season 1, as I believe it's 16 drivers will do battle in, not 16 drivers, excuse me, I can't do the math in my head. 16 teams will do battle in our final race from the Nürburgring, with 2 teams advancing to the finale. Gap down to 1.4 seconds. What I was thinking, Lewis, is that if Rogers is close on fuel, de Jong is in now a situation where the cars behind are well and truly in the drafting range, and he's not going to enjoy the same sort of clean air that he might have been thinking that he'd have at the start of the race.
Yeah, it kind of depends on like whether this is even going. This is what I was wondering, is that maybe this is Josh. I'm thinking of potentials here, potentially going a lap even longer than what was initially anticipated. I don't really know. Obviously, they've all run the numbers behind the scenes time and time again, so I actually kind of doubt that in a sense. But obviously, they've noticed something and his pace dropped off. Maybe it was just a couple of mistakes, although from Josh Rogers, I am really not sure about that. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, you can listen on right now. There is definitely heavy fuel saving. I tell you what, let's jump onto the visor cam here down the hill and just listen through the S's where he's lifting off. And I mean, we talk about the braking point being the curb on the right-hand side. Rogers is lifting before he even gets to the curb on the left side. Once more, braking a good 50, 100 meters early down in through turn 6. And this is committed fuel saving. This is a driver that knows the number that he needs to meet, and he knows exactly where he needs to lift off to hit his numbers as well, Lewis.
What's Alejandro Sanchez like, though, in comparison? Because if this is how much Josh Rogers is fuel saving, we'll ride on board and listen in. How much is Sanchez saving as well? Is he saving even remotely the same amount?
Yes. There's the answer. You can see revs very much just go away there as Sanchez pulls the clutch in, avoids slowing the car down as he lifts off the throttle, uses the momentum down the hill as well to just extend as much of the advantage that you can get with the fuel saving. Beneke will be doing the same, as will Bouteloup behind. And so we're in this interesting situation. Two battles to keep our eyes on. One, of course, being the battle for the actual win in this race and the prize money associated with it, Lewis. And then, of course, the trip to Munich and the 2 tickets on the line.
Remember how I said that Josh Rogers' lap like in the mid-15s and then a little bit in the high 15s? Throw that out the window. 15.4, 15.3 and a 15.2 on the last lap in a shock turn of events. Josh Rogers is responding, but to be fair, to his credit, 15.2 on the last lap. Alejandro Sanchez is trying to match that gap and still tried to hammer it in. Rogers has responded and trying to keep that draft at bay, but any slight slip up now, whilst you're pushing to the limit, is just... I mean, it was going to open the door before, but now that you know that Sanchez is pushing and you know that he's hungry, yeah, I would almost not want to be in Josh Rogers' position at present. Of course, they're all fighting to try and go slightly past the hour mark, because if you get to 59, 58, whatever minutes left you can get, whatever you can go is fuel saving that the second driver doesn't have to do, which means they can push as hard as they can. Although fuel saving still will be a thing in seconds, I'd almost guarantee it.
I'd just like to point out, by the way, I'm going to bring my expertise into the RaceSpotTV commentary booth here as the 2019 Petit Le Mans Split 5 GTE winner in a BMW M8 GTE as well. I can say the one thing that I found, Lewis, a couple of years ago, and I had the pleasure of racing this track in this car, fuel saving, it's a rhythm that you slip into, and once you get there, it is one of the most wonderful feelings that you can get. You don't... When some people think about fuel saving, I think they think about it from a negative perspective. But personally, I found on occasion I can be faster when I'm fuel saving than when I go full flat out, because I think about how I'm driving the car. I think about how I'm managing the weight of the car, as well as you think about, rolling off of the throttle in the right way, getting onto the brakes in the right way as well. There's so many different factors that come into it, and we are seeing, I think, Joshua Rogers had to slightly mix up his rhythm for the fuel saving, but now that he's found it again, the lap times are coming down to that same consistent mark.
I don't know if you've ever had it in a race where you've been fuel saving or tyre saving or something in that sense, and then you get to a point in the race where you realise, oh, hang on, I don't need to fuel save. Like, say, for example, you realise the lap's going to go, or the race is going to go a lap shorter than you thought. Oh, mistake. We'll go back to that point in a second.
This would be exit of turn 7, I do believe, as well. Yes, back onto the back straightaway. To the replay machine we go, Lewis, and it's Federico Godoy. And once more, this might be by himself.
Pretty sure I might be on the brakes, going on to the curbing on the... There we go. Oh, same mistake we've seen from a couple, most notably from Kova. Easy mistake to make, just got wide and onto that curb. The rear left just picks up the grass ever so slightly. And then there's obviously a large, massive grip differential between the two sides of that tyre, and around she goes.
I've never done that before in my life, Lewis. Never.
You sound like someone who's really honest about that.
I'll say that the one thing that I found was sometimes you just put the slightest of foots onto the grass, just like Godoy did there, and it bites back the grass. I found out viciously in Sebring a couple of years ago as well. Just trying to push the limit, trying to be that much quicker, maximize the advantage. Unfortunately, at a track like this, really there is no runoff area. Built in 1969, in just 6 months, the first race ever run at the Michelin Raceway Road Atlanta was a Can-Am race back in 1970. The original owners sold the track off in 1978, and it bounced around ownership groups without any major investment until 1993, when the track unfortunately went bankrupt, and then in came Dr. Don Panos. I mean, I think it's fair to call Dr. Don father of modern American sports car racing. He bought the track, made it his home of his motorsports operation, and then went from there, starting the Petit Le Mans race, which very much 20 years later has become a staple in international motorsports. The track had to get modified as such. We're diving our way down into the chicane. This was added to conform to FIA standards, because you couldn't have straightaways that long for international events. You had a new pit and paddock area, which of course we see on the inside of this track. got the outside pits as well that get used for the support series. And that all started back in 1996. The designer of the Adelaide GP track, Bob Barner, actually got involved in that redesign, and in 1998 Petit Le Mans started, and wow, it has really just become a cult classic of an endurance event. One of the 4 IMSA Michelin Endurance Cup challenges as well, and the 10 hours here, Lewis, into the night. It's always a fun race, and I can't wait to potentially go and visit this one in person as well, because I do know for a fact there's a lot of iRacers that head to the track as well and really live in and experience that endurance racing atmosphere.
Yeah, obviously, we spoke last week about all of the races and stuff that would be on drivers, sim racers, whatever their bucket lists, and you count things like the Indy 500, Daytona, obviously various endurance races around the planet and big sporting events, etc., etc. But this is one that's kind of a bit underrated and underutilized by some drivers, because everyone towards the end, it's always one that I get to at the end of the year, like, oh yeah, I forgot that was on, and I watch it, and it's always fantastic, always full of drama, and it's a fantastic venue because it's one of those ones where, because of the undulation and because of the way the circuit is, you really see the cars work up and over the curbs all the time. You're watching the drivers wrestle for grip constantly. Obviously, with Petit Le Mans, you're watching traffic and all that difficulty in the middle of a pack. You really do understand how a race unfolds, and so from that perspective, certainly one that would be on my list of venues to visit in the, I would say, near future, but let's be honest, who knows how near the future. We'll say 10 years. we'll say that, will we?
As soon as feasibly possible. Gap out front, by the way, 2 seconds of Rogers, maybe slightly slow adapting to the fuel-saving game, but last time around, I'm in a bit of disbelief here, Lewis.
Yeah, right.
14.837. I tell you what, we'll revisit this in just a few moments' time. There is Alexander Walters coming onto the back straightaway as well. The RHE Esports driver has had some sort of an issue. He was side by side with the Biela Racing Team Euronics car earlier in the lap. They've been enjoying a nice little tussle. I wonder what's happened here. I wonder if it's by himself onto the grass as well.
There it is. Oh,
and it's
again.
In this case, though, it's even smaller of a touch. Let's see if we can get a better look at an aerial angle here. But, I mean, the amount of tire that he's got off on the grass there, Lewis, it is millimeters, if that.
Yeah, you're extending a track as much as possible. You can see there, there's very, very little. This is the point that I brought up to you, we'll kind of understand to a sense, but when you see it unfold like that, you really do grasp it. I said it last week that when it comes to going off on 2 wheels like that, you've effectively got 2 choices. Number one, you actually want to, and this is what you want to do if you're going to run wide, you want to have the entire tyre on the grass, because yes, you're going to straight line, you're going to potentially lose a little bit of time, whatever, but you might be able to slow it down enough, who knows. But if you clip it ever so slightly, which is the second option, basically what it does is it gives a different grip profile to the outside than to the inside tyre, and that is what causes the car to slip and slide, and that is what causes the spin.
And I've just noticed that traffic is not really something we've thought about in these 2-hour sprints in the past, but you can see RSR Esport by G Performance right in front of Joshua Rogers. Pull to the side of the track and let the number 8 car go on through. Strategy, though, we are 5 minutes away from the pit stop window opening, and we've been talking about the fact that it's been relatively warm track conditions. It's cooled to 36 degrees in terms of track temperature, Lewis. But talking to some of the teams in the build-up to this race, it might be just like what we saw at Silverstone, where some cars took 2 tires, some cars took 4 tires. And we're going to see split strategies here. 4 tires would likely be quicker, but you would lose track position, and we've not seen too many on-track passes here today. It might be an interesting call. If you are, let's say, Alejandro Sanchez here, gamble on the 2 tires and see what Joshua Rogers does out front.
It's kind of one of those ones that you don't, I wouldn't want to take 2 tires and then still have to like save fuel and such, because that really does back you into a pretty nasty corner, because then when someone does get to the back of you, because you're already fuel saving and whatnot going down into that chicane, it makes that overtake quite easy, and that's where we've seen all of the overtakes this afternoon realistically, is into that chicane. with fuel saving being involved and being a part of it. So I reckon if I wanted to be, if I was MSI Esports in an ideal sense, go a couple of laps, go as late as possible, and then only take 2. That said, I mean, Josh Rogers, Mitchell de Jong, I could see them only taking 2 and just trying to hang on from the front, because we know de Jong can do it, and we know defensively they know what they're doing.
Well, pit window is opened. Luke Akita starts the flood of cars making their way down onto the lane. Ronan Simsport, the PRT, number 13, also down with Filip Matrevsky right behind. This, though, is early. You were talking about not needing to do fuel saving. I would suspect that these cars very much will be on the back foot now with 62 minutes left on the clock. Kita jumps out. Sven Haase will get in. Matrevsky jumps out. Rodrigo Fluker gets behind the wheel there. And we've also got Urano Esports HP. Arturo Melgar will jump out of that car. Who gets into the number 11? It's Joop de Ligt, who, interestingly, I thought a former Maniti racing driver. Now, though, over with the German Urano. Cube Racing as well down on pit road, expecting maybe the flood the next time around. What does Rogers do as he comes through the chicane underneath the bridge? Doesn't look to the inside to come down onto pit road. Neither do the cars behind him, Lewis. And I think that really does make me even more curious as to what the cars that came down just a lap ago were doing.
Yeah, I think it is way too early. Surely it's way too early for those lot that have already just come in. We've got Williams Esports Razor there. They're in the pit lane now. Again, for me, feels that it's too early. I'm not sure about this strategy call, but they're giving it a go regardless, and maybe trying to throw something in it, try and gain some track position on some of the other cars out on circuit. But yeah, I'm not vibing with that idea.
United Sim Sports GT Valvoline also down onto the lane. P1 Esports and Rafael Rezag finishing up his stint here as more and more cars entering on towards pit road. Out of turn 7, second through fourth, separated by half a second right now. Jeremy Bouteloup wants to try and scamper on past Beneke to challenge Sanchez. Of course, 2 battles to think about. Rogers and Beneke, they're fighting for bragging rights. And then Sanchez and Bouteloup, they're fighting over the all-important tickets to Munich. All of these teams, of course, fighting for the cash prize on the line as well. Total of $4,200 across the teams. There goes MSI. Here comes Bouteloup as well. Kawanda and Redline able to extend one more lap. And interestingly, that Joshua Rogers, the race leader, Lewis, able to go the furthest of them all. I would suspect the slow speed that we saw slightly earlier was to facilitate this strategy.
Also, potentially, MSI, they maybe could have gone, like some of the other teams that have pitted around this time, maybe they could have gone a lap longer, and they've boxed at this point because of where they'll come out of the pit lane. They'll come out of the pit lane with obviously 59 minutes and whatever seconds to go, so they've passed the halfway point, so you do that again, times that stint by 2, and then carry away to the checkered flag. This might just be enough, especially if you take 2 tyres in this scenario, it might just be enough to try and jump Josh Rogers, although it is going to be a tall order, and to get to the checkered flag from here is obviously possible. It's fine, but they will have to fuel save more than that number 8 car and the number 1. All the drivers that are not stopping now, they will have to fuel save more. Those that are staying out will be able to basically push it 100% all the way to that checkered flag.
So up on the jacks, at the very least, they'll take 2 tires. On board with Rogers. What does he do? Left or right under the Fox Factory Bridge? He pulls to the right, down onto pit road. And there's very tricky pit entry sideways down the hill as well. But no worries there for Joshua Rogers. Beneke follows him in, as does Chris Lullum. You would suspect that with the hour being complete, every single car would be down onto the lane. And what have you seen there, Lewis?
I think Salva Talons has lost quite a lot of time in pit lane. He's behind even Salva Talons is now behind the MSI Sports, now behind even the Bila Racing team, Charlie Collins, and that lot. They've all come out way ahead, all in the pit lane, so everything's been switched.
And that's because 4 tires, Lewis. MSI have elected to gamble on 4 tires and send out Salva Talons for a 58-minute sprint to the end. What can he do here? He's got Sven Haase in front of him, first target. But more crucially, the gap to Charlie Collins in the 81 machine is almost 13 seconds out on track.
Prepare yourself for this order to be very confusing for a bit, with some drivers down the order much more than they should be. Ooh, spicy moment. A lot of drivers, a lot of teams rolling the dice and taking a gamble. This is what we wanted. We want to see some spicy action. I think we are going to get it here.
No gamble from Mitchell de Jong. 2 tires being taken there. He needs the track position and cycles back out into the race lead. Where is Redline Red and Enzo Benito coming through turn 3 right now? 2 seconds behind, and it is Ricardo Rico, who has worked his way up into the top 3, and you know what, Lewis, is in with a shout of taking victory here today. He has not taken any tires, I do believe, but the World Championship contender has a podium position in his grasp.
Charlie Collins is directly behind him, though. I don't know if you want to take a look at him, because he is right on the rear end of that. There's been contact a couple of times, just a little bit of bump, a bit of Morse code, a little bit between the two. I did wonder if this Zenith Esports car had jumped everyone by the lack of tyres, but wow, like that is a crazy call, one that I don't think will work out, to be honest. I think the pace differential, as we're going to see even here between Charlie Collins, who's going to fire his way through for VRS Coanda. But I love the idea. I love taking the risk.
And I mean, at the end of the day, Lewis, if it doesn't pay out in terms of a podium position, it might still pay out in terms of a position in our finale in a couple of weeks' time, because Lorenzo Colombo, who's taken over from Chris Lullum in the Ice Blue Team Redline car, is 6 seconds behind Ricardo Rico right now. So
and back in the pit lane.
And is he? Oh, he is back in the pit lane. Oh, I wonder if there was a penalty to be served for potentially speeding on entry or exit. It's so easy to do. And Team Redline Blue down on pit road. That will be their hopes done for the day. Back out front, let's check in with the top 3 and just take a look at the gaps. 2.5 between Redline and Coanda for first and second. Charlie Collins will be hunting down Enzo Benito here, and he's got that trip to Munich right in his driver's seat.
Yeah, and it's the question was, what is going to happen now with the 474 MSI Esports that's currently down in 9th place and away behind this target for him. Salva Talon's behind the wheel. Still has to, I think, fuel save a little bit. Maybe not too much, but still a little bit. But either way, currently running in that 9th spot, I wouldn't rule out the MSI Esports from trying to get involved in that battle between Team Redline, between VRS Coanda, up there on the podium, and try and grab that ticket back. A long afternoon ahead, you would think.
And let's just work out this math, right, as Salva Talons tries to get on past Sven Haase. Haase is not going to fight this one back as well. I think he probably got the memo from his engineer, as Talons a bit slow through the chicane, but no harm, no foul. Trying to do the math here. Roughly 50 laps to go as Haase through the grass very slightly. 16 seconds is the gap between de Jong and Salva Talons. So that means about 14 seconds would be the gap between Talons and Charlie Collins, who is the car that he's trying to chase down at this point in time. That is a mighty task to reel in the gap there, Lewis. And crucially, if we take a look at the track conditions, they've actually jumped back up to 43 degrees Celsius. So Salva Talons would be very grateful to have those fresh tires.
I was going to say that if what they are praying for at the moment in MSI Esports is for this track to get really quite hot, because the hotter it gets, they're on fresher tyres than everyone else, because obviously everyone else has only taken 2. So they're on fresher tyres in comparison. That means that their advantage, they will become a part of it if the track gets hotter. I mean, I'm sure they'll come back a part of it. Anyway, we'll keep our eye close on lap times for the MSI Esports squad. At the moment, they are running in the mid-15s, towards the higher 15s, and those on the podium are also running in the higher 15s. The issue is not only pace, but it is overtaking people. That is the difficulty here. Martin van Luzenoord, the next car ahead for R8G Esports. It's like I say, getting to them is one thing, getting past them is another, and I don't think everyone will be quite as kind as Sven Haase was.
Take a look at movers and shakers in the race so far. Haase was very kind, and you can see the challenge will increase for MSI, who are down 6 on the day. Don't think Van Luzenoord is going to be too keen to hand the position over there in the number 4 with Siepola in front, and then it would be Williams, Rico, and Collins, the route to the top 3 for Salva Talons in the 474. Still does have 53 minutes left to go. Track, by the way, we're talking a bit about the history slightly earlier on, repaved back in 2007. And then a year later, a number of changes were actually made for motorcycle competition. never actually raced in the real world. It was a couple of changes never used. Removed back in 2017, so in effect, the track is reverted to the layout back in 2003. There's the move then for Talons down the inside of Van Loozenord. Van Loozenord will now look in his rearview mirror and watch Haase in the Biela Racing Team car close the gap. And Talons now has 3 seconds of clear air before you'll catch up to Kova and Matti Sieppula. Back in the pack, by the way. It's not just action up in the field. Josh Thompson in the Williams Esports Razor. He took 4 tires as well and is now trying to use them to get on past a number of cars. Already slipped on past German simracing.de. Now got R8G Jr. and Elliot Veyron in his sights.
And also one of the earlier stoppers here, if I remember correctly, pitted on lap 47, car ahead a couple of laps later. So essentially might have to do a fair amount of fuel saving as well, was a little bit prior to the hour mark. And yeah, I'm said at the time, not 100% sure on that strategy, but that's what they're committed to. So in a sense, from this scenario, it's not just about coming through the order, it's about coming through the order whilst fuel saving, which is like trying to spin 3 plates on 2 fingers. It's impossible, but I mean, give it a go, why not? I'd almost not be surprised if there are a few cars on the grid that will be entering pit lane a couple of minutes prior to the checkered flag just to pick up a little bit extra fuel.
It's going to be close. I'm just trying to do the math right now for Josh Thompson. Maybe this is the opportunity to just do some fuel saving early in the stint and get yourself at least in the right position, as Veyron now behind United Simsports GT Valvoline, who another car not to take tires. Alexander Davidson is going to have a challenge to fend off the charge from Veyron. In fact, not going to fight this one back. Thompson says, thank you very much. I'll slide down the inside as well through turn 1. Well handled there from the 015 and Davidson to get out of the way there, because Thompson was a man on a mission there.
Nicely done from Josh Thompson. Saw the opportunity and once again was not waiting a second invitation, went for it. Now the question is he going to speed his way by Veyron as well? Because the moment that he does, he's got no one in front to fuel save off, and that's where things might get a little bit more tricky for him, as we've got some heavy traffic up here.
Yeah, this is, I think, the first time this season we've really seen traffic be an important factor, and the gap between first and second has actually slid on up to 3.1 seconds as Benito and Collins, who we're riding on board with right now, navigate their way through a couple of cars. For a few moments' time, Charlie Collins, the young Welshman, was all over the rear end of Enzo Benito, who has really made his name on other platforms, but in 2021 has been a very consistent performer on the iRacing service. You think back not just to BMW Sim GT Cup competition, where he's already punched his ticket to Munich after winning in the Land of the Rising Sun alongside Beneke a couple of weeks ago. But a Bathurst victory alongside Max Verstappen, who's in action today in F1 competition as well. Sees himself sitting out of the first of his BMW Sim GT Cup events. But you never know, Lewis. We might actually see Max Verstappen making a return for the final round at the Nürburgring. He's enjoyed these Sim GT Cups. He's been developing a bit of a rivalry with Josh Rogers, if you ask me, and I'm really looking forward to seeing that continue to develop over the next few years.
I absolutely love rivalries because they're what give you spice. If you're a fan of a driver of a team, they're what make you want that driver to come out on top. And if it's just that driver beating the field, oh, fine, yay, they won again, cool. But it's when you've got the rivalry, that's when you have emotion. If you think into motorsport with, Prost Senna, obviously the easy one that everyone goes back to, in IndyCar, in any sort of GT racing, obviously you think of any sort of endurance racing, and you get those rivalries in other sports as well, football, God knows how many rivalries you can have in there. Those rivalries are what make those victories so much more important and so much more thrilling, not only as a driver but to the fans as well. And obviously for us up in the booth, we want to see those rivalries. We want to see those drivers fighting tooth and nail, and that rivalry we've seen a few times between Rogers and Verstappen. We saw them battle fantastically, obviously until one moment back at Suzuka this season. We've seen them fighting out very, very hard. We've got that rivalry between Redline and Coanda, which we're seeing really come to the fore in most of the races we're watching these days. How many times do we see them battle across the year so far even? And we're seeing those rivalries build up between certain drivers within those squads. Rogers, Benecker, obviously, elsewhere in teams-wise, Sebastian Job as well, a part of that sort of big battle at the front of sim racing on iRacing, and I love seeing it. It gives such vibrance to a race.
Navigating their way through traffic. I should put it out there as well. If you have suggestions for great sim racing rivalries that you've seen over the years, do get in touch with us at RaceSpotTV or use the hashtag BMW Sim. I tell you what, as these cars work their way through the traffic, a good opportunity to check in with social media right now. See what the various things are being said. There's not just this split of competition, there's a second split of competition as well. Wonder how that one's going. United SimSport, you can see there. Great to see them in action here. Paint's forgotten. Oops, new team glitches, but stay tuned to the broadcast because one of their cars up in the top 16 with Davidson trying something slightly different on the fuel strategy. BMW Motorsports, what's going on with Joshua Rogers? He's been dominating the BMW Sim GT Cup race so far, but his lead is melting away. Then BS Zebra Machine wants you to know that you can head on over to the Zebra YouTube channel to follow the big red machine at work, but you can also stay involved, of course, with us here and watch all of the 3 BS competition cars. One final tweet to take a look at here, and it's the latest update from BMW Motorsports. Driver changes and pit stops are done, and guess what? Coanda SimSport still in the lead. It's been a commanding performance so far as they look to go back-to-back here in the BMW Sim GT Cup.
Times are looking really good as well from Mitchell de Jong. 16.0 on the last lap. Was running in the 15s a little bit more inconsistent than his teammate, but the cars behind are not catching there. Are also running in the 16.0s. MSI Esports in comparison, Sour Talons, obviously we'll keep our eyes focused on them, worked up to 7th place as Sour Talons for MSI Esports. 15.8 on the previous lap, using those 4 tyres to try and close down the gap. Next target for them is Pova as the battle for second. It's stretched out a little bit through traffic, but then with a little bit of a dive and a bit of an ambitious move through that lap traffic from Charlie Collins, once again those two are back together again.
What I am noticing is there's been a couple of smaller teams, if you'll let me say that. The United SimSports, the German SimRacing.de, trying to take no tires, and slightly catching up with them now is Ryan Barneveld down the inside in the BS competition. Number 90, number 2, depending on how you look at it, or where you're looking as well. Next car up in line will be Davidson in the United SimSports GT Valvoline machine. Only 3 cars in the top 20, Lewis, elected to take 4 tires. MSI Esports, the BS Competition 89 car, and then Williams Esports Razor. We've checked in with 2 of them. Quickly check in with Mikkel Gard in the BS Competition Big Blue machine. This is not the red car. Working their way across the start-finish line in 12th position. A bit of clean air back and front for them. For Salva Talons, though, 1 and a bit seconds off from Matti Siepola in the 707. But crucially here, Lewis, the gap to Charlie Collins has not really moved at all.
No, I think 4 tyres. It was ambitious. It was maybe worth a go, but I think it might have just cost them that ticket to Munich. The gap is slightly too big to close down. Even if it was just those 2 on circuit, there was no one else that Salva Talons had to overtake. I'd still say it would be a pretty hard task. The thing is, those with 2 tyres, it may get a little bit harder as the stint goes on. As things close down towards that checker flag, more so in sort of 20 minutes or so, you might just see, if they've not kept track of their tyres as much as others, you might see those on 2 tyres start to struggle a little bit more as the stint goes on. Ryan Barneveld, that we were just on board with then, look at this, going to make that move, was so close coming out of the final corner onto the backstretch. This doesn't seem like it's going to be a particularly difficult move as he'll move his way by United SimSports GT Valvoline.
That's the tires as well, right? Getting the momentum out of turn 7. It's so deceptively tricky as well. You've got the grass on both the entry and exits that you can't afford to touch, and we've seen some of the best already making that mistake here today. And Track falls away from you, trying to roll yourself onto the power. Barneveld in the big red BS competition car up into 16th position. It's also up 9 on the day. A bit of an indication that while we might have said at the start of this race, Lewis, that qualifying hasn't always been the most important. If you qualify out of the top 20, just the reality of the situation is you're always going to struggle to get up into the podium positions.
Yeah, it's not an easy task at that point. I think most of the podiums have come from within inside. I'm pretty sure all of them actually would have come from inside the top 10. You know, we've seen a couple of times drivers have gone sort of plus 15, plus 20 on positions, but it's always from very, very far down up to maybe a top 10. Once first round of the season, BS competition, it was Ryan Barneveld and Lauren Heinrich qualified 19th, finished that day in 5th, so a pretty decent gain for them to get up into those positions, which obviously qualify them for the next round, that invitational round in a couple of weeks' time, which could be oh so crucial to some of these drivers and teams that do not have a ticket to Munich presently, especially if it's in the car that they like. Obviously, you said before that a few drivers get along with this M8 and other drivers do not, and this might be one of those last few opportunities for them to properly take advantage of the GTE machinery. You can see how much the number 1 car, this Team Redline Red, is firing up. Enzo Benito is leaving nothing left on the circuit, and Charlie Collins directly behind is almost sat there waiting for a mistake.
I think that's very much what he's doing, because of course Redline and Coanda in front have already punched their tickets, so Benito, Beneke, De Jong, Rogers, they will meet whoever takes the 2 tickets from today's race in December, regardless of where they finish. So Charlie Collins in 3rd, he'll give up roughly $300 per driver in terms of prize money. The more important thing will be the entry to the end of year event in Munich. I am starting to wonder though, Lewis, you and I had been speculating before we came on air, 2nd through 5th, that's what we've been talking about, drivers advancing into the finale in a couple of weeks' time from the Nürburgring. But does that mean if Enzo Benito is sitting up there in 2nd position and Charlie Collins is sitting there in 3rd, are we really looking at 4th through 7th in effect coming to the Nürburgring in a couple of weeks' time? Because that would be Zenith Esports, David Williams in the VRS number 18, MSI, who I think probably would get there anyway, so that might promote another team. So let's carry this one on further. Kova, R8G, and then the Biela Racing Team Euronics car are the 4 that we might see advance in a couple of weeks' time.
Yeah, we'll keep our eye on which drivers, which teams get moved over into that event, because it's a little bit of a complicated stat to work out which 4 from each race. Obviously, from the first race, really, really easy. It's the 4 that got there in the ones through 2nd and 5th. Every other race afterwards, it becomes a little bit more complicated, dependent on previous qualifying, etc., etc. So it's a little bit more of a complicated stat, which we will catch up on when obviously we head to the Nürburgring, which we'll be able to find on any sort of social media. I'm sure we posted on RaceSpotTV elsewhere as well. But just want to say, by the way, MSI Esports got another position on Kova, wondering if they were going to get themselves inside the top 5. You were saying that they were marching their way up to it, and maybe, you know, if that countback was going to go to someone, it's not going to go to them, because I reckon they are going to be inside that top 5 pretty sharpish, because they're closing down very, very quickly on VRS Coanda. The number 18 that is directly ahead. David Williams behind the wheel at the moment, a bit of lap traffic between the 2 of them, but MSI Esports are marching forward. This is a valiant effort at the moment from Salva Talents.
Man on a mission, and I mean with track conditions, let's check in once more, up to 43 degrees Celsius here. Expecting the fall off to be more and more later in the run. Cars on 2 tires will start to fall off, and of course Ricardo Rico in 4th. No tires during his stop. Slightly unexpected given the change to the tire model recently on the iRacing.com service, but nevertheless, who knows how that will play out. Battle, by the way, for 8th on back is getting very, very close. R8G Biela Racing Team, and guess who? Rodrigo Fluker in the PRT Ronin Simsport car, once more making up a number of positions throughout the race so far. Not the best qualifying performance for them. They've got Dylan Shrivens, who has made the switch from Maniti Racing to Urano. So not the first driver that we've seen make that switch. Joop de Leek slightly earlier. And he's in the Urano Esports Huawei car. Dylan Shrivens, I believe nicknamed Bobo, right, Lewis?
Bobo certainly is. He's been a driver that's been in sim racing for a long time. More focuses on endurance racing and whatnot, but is very, very comfortable here in iRacing and spread his talents out across sim racing all over the place, and is definitely one inside a small community that sort of get along very well across multiple simulators. But yeah, I was a bit surprised to see that switch, but yeah, we've seen a few drivers make that jump from Maniti to Urano. Unknown what's happening behind the scenes. Urano picking up quite a few drivers, and Dylan Scrivens, who was so very strong in this car when we did the race back at Daytona, obviously the Daytona 24, the curtain raiser ages ago in the endurance racing side of iRacing. In this I'm pretty sure he was looking strong in the previous round at Silverstone, if I remember correctly, but there was an incident, if I remember, at Luffield that he was sort of involved in. That was obviously when he was in a slightly more green vehicle and now moves to a black and red one, and looks very striking to his name as well for Bobo.
Side by side through turn 12, it's Ricardo Ferreira and Elliot Veyron, who sweeps around the outside, just about able to hold on as the 999. Let's try and see if I can not butcher this team name. Estre Madura y Ribateo. Probably butchered that, but nevertheless, 15th there. You can see Josh Thompson has scampered on through with those fresher tires. And he's not necessarily been able to make full advantage of them. The next card up the road for Thompson in the Williams Esports Razor green, black and blue will be BS Competition, who are in their own right closing in on the battle that we were just taking a look at. And so with 37 minutes to go, these drivers might be fighting over, if I'm counting back correctly here, 1 or 2 spots in our final round of the season. Like Lewis says, you will have to stay in touch on social media to find out which 16 teams will be competing in our season finale in Season 1. And then Season 2, I have seen the dates for the next season in this 2021 schedule, Lewis. The BMW M4 GT3 machine will be heading out onto the track in the second half of this year. Had the chance to race it as well at the 24 Hours of the Nürburgring a couple of weeks ago. Wonderful, stable car to drive. Be interesting to see how it races in comparison with the GTE machine.
Yeah, like this is like the whole point of like having these two different cars, which I absolutely love, because it factors in two slightly different driving styles, and I like that idea. This GTE works for some drivers and not necessarily to others, and in that sense, some drivers that may prefer the M4 GT3 are waiting for that car to then take advantage of the season and book their ticket in Season 2. Riding on board with Dylan Scrivens, a couple of mistakes from the PRT Ronin Simsport car ahead, saw that. This is where like the lapping and the positioning from this lot all becomes very, very interesting, because of obviously with the strategy and stuff. As far as I'm aware, spinner.
Watch the rejoin. Ooh, and that's the group of cars that we were just paying attention to as well. Lucas Lippert in the German simracing.de number 67, right in front of the pack. And no one able to take advantage, but you'll see on the tail end of that one, it really has enabled BS Competition to make this a 5-way fight for 8th on back. Look at Sven Haase just trying to find a way down the inside in through turn 3. You can make it stick, but does require some cooperation from the cars around you. 34 minutes left on the clock then. It is Mitchell de Jong once again in control of a BMW Sim GT Cup race, looking for back-to-back victories here. Enzo Benito in second with Charlie Collins in third, but very much in the driver's seat, given that both of the cars in front of him have already tasted victory. Tickets to December will go to Coanda if they can hold on. Ricardo Rico, by the way, with those older tires, is starting to drop off more and more. The last time around was a 1:16.673. It's 7, almost 8 tenths of a second slower than the cars around him. He has to let lap traffic go on past, and that's Pure Sims Esports. Here comes David Williams to take advantage.
And guess who's not very far behind him? Your guess is right. Here we are. MSI Esports are closing in as well, potentially into a top 4 position. 15.5 on the previous lap, so closing in massively on this group. Well, potentially, well, I would suspect would make short work of the 260 as there's the battle, all BS competition on the inside of Urano running up the hill through turn 1. Very, very tight stuff between them. Mikael Gard behind the wheel, I believe, of the BS competition car, and Dylan Scrivens dropping the position in that scenario. Yeah, not an ideal situation for Urano Esports.
Well, that's what you call, I have 4 tires, get out of my way. I'll take one more look at this and spool it back because there were lights flashing from Mikael Gard as he tried to make his way on through. Here you can see as we jump off the rearward shot from the Urano Esports Huawei machine. Hard to tell, there we go, the lights begin to flash, and I think intentions very much communicated by Gard to send it down the inside, just about leaving enough space for one another. And let's jump back to live coverage because David Williams side by side with Salva Talons under the bridge, down through turn 11, in through turn 12. We've seen this happen already once on occasion with R8G making the move stick, but Williams is not going to be such an easy car to get around. Talons still on the outside through turn number 1. Will Williams lean on him very slightly? No, he doesn't. Gives him racing room. Talons comes back at him, gives him a bit of a shove, and Talons up into the top 5.
Brilliant display between the final corner. That is incredibly difficult coming through T12. It's so narrow down there as further battles continue down the order. I think that might be, is that PRT Ronan Simsport? Certainly is, who's off the road. I was wondering if they've actually got a little bit too much fuel to save. They pitted on lap 46, which is 2 laps earlier than most of the other people. It was 2 laps earlier than halfway. These are one of the teams that were wondering if can actually make it, but costs a mistake there and drops out of that train anyway.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're talking about fuel saving, not having the draft anymore, look at him throwing the car through turn 6, using the camber to his advantage. Let's go pick up what happened to Rodrigo Fluker, who was having a very impressive day. It was side by side with the Urano team. Well, let's see if we can take one more look at this one. It's good aggressive racing, I do think, between all the various players here. You can see it's Gard trying to sneak down the inside in through turn 1. Opens the door for Bobo to try and make it side by side. Always difficult to make it work. Like I said slightly earlier, Lewis, it requires some assistance, and I don't think Fluker was really in a giving mood.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to tell in that scenario if Bobo took too much of the curb on the inside at T3 and it pushed the front end of the car, or if what it kind of looks like, if Fluker had turned in a little bit too early and wasn't given quite enough room. Not 100% sure on that one myself, and so I will avoid making it. I will sit on the fence. It's glorious up here. And yeah, either way, they came together, went off the road. The PRT Ronan Simsport dropped down the order regardless in that scenario. Pace seemed to have dropped off despite what I think is 4 tyres on that car, so potentially we'll use that grip to close up. We'll have to wait and see. Zenith Esports under an awful lot of pressure from MSI here, and I'm pretty sure this will be an easy move. Yeah,
this one should be easy. I think Rico acknowledges that, moves to the right side of the track, pulls to the outside of the braking zone, and there goes Salva Talons up into 4th, 10 seconds behind the car in front. And when you think about a 15-second advantage of taking 2 tires versus taking 4, I mean, it gives you an indication there, Lewis, that Talons has only been able to use the rubber advantage to reclaim 5 of the 15 seconds. So as we head into, you know, the final race of the season, it can never say like for like tracks, for example, that the strategy will work out like this, but Nürburgring likely to be a higher wear track in some ways. Might be seeing every single car taking 4 tires in that race.
Well, I think in that race you might see someone take a wild gamble to see if it'll work out, because you know that you can defend quite a lot around the Nürburgring, and it's one of those tracks where you can hold fortunes in your own hands. And so I think you might see some people gamble a little bit. Obviously, it is a high tyre wear circuit, all things considered. So I think the balance there is going to be much, much harder. I'm glad I'm not on the strategy wall. Either way, today, the strategy seems to have favoured those on 2 tyres. Obviously, we can see that with the gap between Team Redline in 2nd position, MSI Esports, who are now in 4th. Obviously, the 4 tyres versus the 2 tyres. But they've used that 5 seconds. You said that came out from a 15-second differential in the pit lane. They've cut down 5 of those seconds whilst overtaking a lot of cars, and potentially it will get better as the stint goes on. BS competition down the inside of R8G Esports. R8G not fighting that one at all. Martin van Loozenord being passed at the present from Mikael Gard.
And again, tyres very much just able to lean on them, rely on the grip, and have that confidence as we approach the final 30 minutes in today's action. The penultimate round in Season 1 and the final publicly available race for anyone on the iRacing.com service to enter. A reminder that even though our next race is invitational only, Season 2 will have 4 more public races with 1 invitational finale as well. So when we return in the second half of this year in the M4 GT3, you will be able to jump back into these top split events and build your own challenge for $4,200 in total prize money per event, and entry into the BMW Sim Live in December. Joshua Rogers won at Silverstone, taking home a cool $12,000 as well as a custom designed BMW Motorsports trophy that now holds a very, I'm sure, big spot in the Coanda team house. Ricardo Rico continues to fall down the order. He's in 7th as Matti Sipula has already slipped on past. What will the Zenith Esports driver do though, Lewis? With 30 minutes remaining, he's now going to be looking further back behind it. Mikkel Gard, who's 8 seconds behind him.
Yeah, this is going to get harder and harder. Obviously, tyres don't come back to you in that sense. They're wearing. It's not a thermal degradation. It's not something that can be recontrolled. It's just percentage wear. It's less rubber on the tyre, and it's being taken off, and he is dropping backwards. And unfortunately, I think as much as I love the ambition, but it might be ambition before reality in a sense for Zenith Esports, because that BS competition car will be closing in, and I think the pace is struggling a little bit too much for Zenith here, and obviously not taking any tyres at all. I wouldn't have taken that risk. I'd love to see it. I don't see that risk ever working out, not in a month of Sundays.
It's the great thing about being up in the box, right, Lewis? We get to talk about people making and trying different things as RHE Jr. gets checked up behind Mike Wagner and gets down the inside in through turn 6. Very easily done there. It was a slow start to the race, if you ask me. Very much single file. No one really trying to force the issue. But now in the closing stages, you've got these battle packs beginning to form, and drivers getting increasingly desperate to make moves happen. There's Lorenzo Colombo in the red line blue after coming back down onto pit road. Edge of the top 20 as it looks like R8G, both of their junior teams, on past German Sim Racing and the number 68. Out front, it is still Mitchell de Jong that leads the way. 7 seconds clear from Enzo Benito and Team Redline Red, number 1. Charlie Collins, 3rd place on track. 1st place in terms of the prizes that really matter here today. And definitely looks like he's content to just ride around right now. He must be getting some instructions in his ears here, Lewis, that the prize money on offer, it would be $300 per driver more if he finished in 2nd. But any sort of contact, it risks what is ultimately the more important prize.
So this will be like a large tactical game here, because I think that at least this car will be in a sense that it can attack late. It can attack late on Enzo Benito and try and make that position work. And if it does work, it does work. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Boo-hoo, it's only $300 a driver, extra. But no, obviously they're mostly focused on that ticket at the moment, which...
Ooh.
All go on.
That is Elliot Veyron. That is Josh Thompson who have come together down at turn 10. I think Veyron is really the biggest loser there. There's RSR Esport by G Performance, 1 lap down as Veyron throws the block and says, you're 1 lap down, just mind your own business for now. Let's go and take a look at this one. Oh, I don't know if Thompson is going to be too impressed with that. Looks like Veyron uses a lot of the inside curve. Not necessarily that car turning in as nicely as he would have wanted here, Lewis. One more look at the aerial replay.
Yeah, pretty tough call. I think there's some hard racing between them, and we'll see it from up above, and you can see a clear picture. So a little bit of a dive to the inside, and there was contact before they even got into the braking zone. This part just spits the rear up as the Williams Esports Razor card sort of lifts the rear end of that car up into the air, and it's a shame. But you can see there, that brush, that'd be the bit that I'd be more terrified of, because that can really end in tears. Oh.
It's always so tough to go side by side through this corner because you want to carry as much speed as you can through the second part. You carry that momentum all the way down into turn 1. I've had similar incidents side by side myself. Unfortunately, Veyron on the worst end of that. They only lose a couple of positions with the 999 scampering on through, and Thompson on his fresh rubber will set back to the task at hand with 23 minutes left to go. Getting our update, by the way. Let's check in with social media once more. If you wanted your answer as to what happened to the pace for Joshua Rogers, Lewis, there you go. The man himself telling us he was just saving his fuel.
Very calm and relaxed, I'm sure, as we always expect from Josh Rogers. There isn't too many heads that you'd have in a race car in sim racing these days that would have a calmer mindset in a race. So, I mean, it makes sense, but it's slightly less dramatic.
I mean, come on, we need more drama here on RaceSpotTV. We need to start a scripted. That's what we need. You know how you have sports entertainment, you have wrestling. We need the sim racing equivalent of that.
God, I would not want to be the director of that. Oh, no, you've got to slow down now. Now we've got to create. It's like, oh, God, this is... I mean, I don't know if you've ever had it. I know one of your teammates, I'm sure Elliot would have had it at some point, of trying to organise a team photo shoot, which I can tell you is about as near as makes no difference to a scripted race in the sense of what you're saying. It's a nightmare. It is the least entertaining thing that you can do. And at a point you go, no, do you know what? I'm just going to go and get some AI and I'm going to send them around. I'm just going to hope that it looks all right.
Well, you know what I was going to say? Wonderful social media footage that I saw earlier this week from the WEC paddock where, I guess what they were doing, Lewis, they were taking their season-long photo, but you got the look from the camera car as well of the formation of angry race cars going very slowly as well, because that Land Rover or whatever it is must be doing a good 80 clicks an hour, but for a race car, that's like pedestrian walking speed. So it is an angry, intense thing trying to organize. I will say as well, I think people who look at a crash and say that was intentional don't understand how difficult it is to make something look like it was real, because I can spin, I can force myself to crash very simply, Lewis, but making it look natural, making it look like it wasn't intentional, that's a slightly different story.
I don't really want to throw anyone specific under the bus, so I won't, but I have seen drivers where they're involved in a race and they're thinking, there's like 6 hours to go of this and I don't really want to continue, so what's the easy way to go out? Oh, it'd be easier if like I went out in a crash, because then it's just sort of like, okay. But yeah, faking that is hard work. Faking racing is hard work. If you have someone that gets to the inside, it's sort of like, how do you force a move? Like, if you were to be a director in this circumstance, looking at this, how do you make them go side by side? Do you say, oh, by the way, Benito, can you just lift off a little bit? That's obvious. Do that. Or, Charlie, can you just dive it down? That's obvious as well. So to have it like unfold in a scripted way, it would be hilarious to see. Yeah, I'm sure one person will be out there going, yeah, I'll try that one time. But it's so hard to make it look natural that it's almost impossible.
If anyone's listening and wants to give this a try, Arjuna at RaceSpotTV, I'm happy to talk happy to talk to you and see where we can take this idea. Who knows? We might have the next reality TV sensation on our hands. I will say, I mean, there are other sports in which you were talking about football slightly earlier. Diving, I mean, flopping if you're stateside. I mean, I was watching a certain European game on Wednesday where I was not too impressed with some of the antics on display from some of the teams, but I'm fortunate that at least in sim racing we don't really have to deal with that. Instead, we can speculate and posit what it might be if we had to contend with that. Sometimes you'd wonder with the Redline versus Coanda show, like the BMW Sim GT has been in the past. We've seen 4 or 5 Coanda cars, 4 or 5 Redline cars as well. It is good that for, I feel like the first time this season, Lewis, the top 10, we're seeing a few more new faces being sprinkled in there as well. We've got Kova, we've got Zenith, Urano up there in the top 10 as well, being joined by someone like MSI and R8G, who have been consistent runners so far this season.
I will recall back, I think it was qualifying at Silverstone. I'm not quite sure exactly how many it was, but I'm pretty sure that the top 8 was made up of just Redline and VRS Coanda cars. Because that shows the level of strength that they've had in sim racing in general, and of course in this competition as well. Naturally, when the races unfold and you go toe to toe, things get a little bit more interesting. I can confirm the top 5 in that race were all Team Redline and VRS Coanda. So it's something that we're used to seeing, but it is lovely to see other teams and drivers get involved. Unfortunately, that is not ideal though for Pure Sims Esports, just running wide, as we've seen quite a few drivers do this afternoon.
And once more, it's right in front of some lead lap traffic. That was, I do believe, I saw at least Biela Racing Team. Kova. So that's top 5 and top 6 contenders. Checking up slightly, Daniel Ferguson making that mistake. He gathers that one up nicely. Doesn't do the 180, 360 that we've seen on occasion so far today. Has not been the easiest of days for the 116. Ferguson with 18 or so minutes then to hang on here. Back towards the front. Let's quickly just run through the top 5. There is Mitchell de Jong working his way through turn 3. 7.2 seconds clear of Enzo Benito and Max Benecke in the team Redline Red. Charlie Collins, the young Welshman, sits in their draft, but very comfortably the 81 car looks 17 minutes away from securing a trip to Munich. It will be 2 Redline and 2 Coanda teams then looking good for December. MSI Esports, they tried something different on strategy. Hasn't necessarily cycled out the way they would have hoped, but once more finishing up in the top 5. It's been a consistent season at the very least for the Spanish outfit, with VRS Coanda and David Williams over the bumps at turn 5, with Matti Sieppula for Kova Esports in close pursuit. And so the final of the publicly available races here today, May 16th, will be the final round of Season 1 from the Nürburgring, as I think Daniel Ferguson has gone off the track again. And once more at turn 7, not proving to be the easiest of days then for the team owned by British Touring Car champion, 2-time champion Ash Sutton. But in a couple of weeks' time, a very different sort of a race, Lewis. Let's start picturing and thinking forward to that now, rather than watching these cars not exactly fight it out wheel to wheel. 16 cars. You talked about potential strategy wildcards being thrown up. If anything, I feel like strategy is even less important because there's less variations on what might happen out on track.
Yeah, obviously there's less cars than normal. We normally race around with 40 or so. I think today it's 48 cars, so nearly 50 that have been out there racing. So obviously if you tone that down to a much smaller contingent of teams, it kind of makes understanding the bigger picture a little bit easier, and maybe even the first lap a little bit less calamitous, and makes everything a little bit clearer. But it does, I still think strategy is going to be really, right, obviously it's going to be really important, naturally, but in that sense, especially if you're one of the teams like, say, for example, a Kova or an MSI Esports, you're still going toe-to-toe with quite a lot of the Team Redline and VRS Coanda cars. Because obviously I'm pretty sure it was, from when I went through it, that of the teams that have gone through, I'm pretty sure that there is now going to be at least 2 from each that will be there, because obviously the other ones that have been up there have won a race or already got a ticket rather to Munich, so they don't count for that. But there'll still be 2 or 3 from each outfit there. Now this is the interesting thing, because there's 2 tickets up for grabs. Correct me if I'm wrong. There's 2 tickets up for grabs at Nürburgring, and if you've only got 2 or 3 cars to focus on, those teams working together to make a strategy work, that is going to be mightily, mightily interesting, because you want both your cars to go through, not just one, you want both of them to. And so that's going to play things in a very, very crucial and interesting way.
And to clarify what you're saying, Lewis, it's 2 teams that will get through, 4 different drivers in total. So it also, I think, maybe opens up the question for, you talk about strategy wildcard, what happens if there's one team that manages to just try something different? Who knows how that could work out, because it's yet to be determined and confirmed which the teams that will be competing will be. But you're right, there could be some gamesmanship, and As sim racing becomes increasingly professional, the levels of engagement with your engineers and things like that just ratchets up and up. Let's turn our eyes away then in the final 15 minutes of this race and take a look at some other cars. Here's Johan Harth, who has not, I think, had the most fun here today in the 99. Jamie Fluke, of course, getting sent off the road in through turn 1. Now tucked up behind R8G and the number 12. The iRacing Rallycross World Champion will be back in action in IRX All-Star Invitational action this coming week. On Tuesday, the Real World Superstars head to the Daytona International Speedway, while Sim Racing's Best will head to one of the newest tracks on the IRX schedule, the circuit to Barcelona, Catalunya. Should be an interesting invitational event there. Looking forward to getting underway as well with the 2021 iRacing IRX World Championship in Rallycross. Qualifiers on the horizon there, so if you like slinging some virtual dirt, head on over to the iRacing.com forums and learn more about one of the World Championships that is coming up on the horizon. Harth unable to close in through the first sector. Car definitely doesn't look as settled as one would think from the Apex Racing team. You've got No Name Racing in behind them. But clearly, they found some speed here. No name, but some speed in the number 14 machine.
I was going to say with Johan Harth, I mean, you could give him quite a slippery car and he'll be all right. As much as it's not four-wheel drive, these are rear-wheel drive cars. But obviously, Rallycross, you're used to going slipping and sliding. So necessarily is okay with a slightly looser vehicle. But that said, actually, with Rallycross, because everyone's, I think it's a common misconception with anyone who's not actually done Rallycross before, is that everyone's like, oh, well, you just go into a corner, you just yank the handbrake and send it. It's like, no, well, kind of, but not really. Because, again, a straight car is a fast car, accelerating off the corner. It's a massively difficult thing to take on. And it's why, if you look at most Rallycross drivers, you know, especially in this sense, in iRacing, if you watch them in road course racing, standard as what we're seeing now, they're very, very good as well. And there is a reason for it. It's because they do know what they're doing. So I'm told.
Yeah, well, I think you can measure the number of corners in which the sim racing professionals, let's use that term for the World Championship drivers, there's only 1 or 2 corners where they actually use a handbrake across of the entire schedule.
Right.
Atlanta Motor Speedway, that would be one. I did notice at Brands Hatch, the fictional fantasy, depending on how you want to think of it, layout that we have on the iRacing service, did notice in the All-Star Invitational drivers were using it, especially through turn 1, but
yeah,
you're right. It is. There are other ways to rotate the car, and finding the right way to do those is key to success in Rallycross. Harth looking more and more like he might get the move done on R8G. But talking about Rallycross, I mean, you talk about seeing those drivers compete well in the real world. Mitchell de Jong, our inaugural iRacing Rallycross World Champion back in, I believe it was 2018. Has some experience in the real world as well, competing in the X Games. Now, though, very much committed to sim racing. Part of the Coanda team at the Coanda team house as well. Competing in 3 different world championships in the same calendar year. It's something only a couple of drivers have done in the past, but Bobby Zelensky, his teammate, the notable name. We've got the eNASCAR Coca-Cola World Championship, and then, of course, the iRacing Rallycross World Championship, which will kick off in a couple of months' time. We've just wrapped up with our Road Racing World Championship as well, so Mitchell de Jong, who finished in the top 3 in that championship, looks forward to trying to reclaim his throne at the top of the Rallycross pile. He's 10 minutes away from a back-to-back victory in the BMW Sim GT Cup as well. That will be a nice $2,400 in just a couple of races' time for the American. That's William Chadwick down into the final corner in the United Sim Sports 2 Easy Finance machine. See if we can pick up what's happened here, Lewis.
Yeah, I think it'll be down, obviously down into chicane, maybe overdoing it a little bit. Maybe another car's assisted him. I'm not 100% sure. It might be a bit of assistance. Let's take a look. Being dived. Oh no, rear brake lock. There we go. Whoa, that's a stonker. And yeah, basically garners his way to the apex on the second part of the chicane. See if he'll gather it up quite nicely and just sort of drive forward and, you know, hopefully not get involved in any other instance. A bit of an awkward situation to be in when you land at that part. I mean, obviously he'll be on the brakes through that entire scenario. Quite lucky that he didn't go straight on even further into the road, because it would have been almost unavoidable. And there were some drivers as well that were a little bit further up the order, down towards the back end of the top 10, that were coming through in that scenario. You desperately don't want to take those out. Easy mistake to make as you drop down the hill, because where it crests is quite bumpy down there as well. But obviously you've got the undulation of going up and over the crest, which is way before the braking zone, don't worry. But obviously as you're going downhill, you've got a little bit less on the rear of the car, and it's always wanting to overtake you at the best of times anyway, and they're clearly just a little bit too much.
Edge of the top 10, Martin van Loozenhout has dropped a couple of positions. He's got Ryan Barneveld in the big red machine, the big red zebra, if you will. Right behind him, it's Sven Haase in 12th. PRT, Ronan Simsport, and Rodrigo Fluker drop to 13th as a result. Over the crest through turn 3, on board with Barneveld in through the S's. Can see Van Loozenhout trying to just use as much speed as he can through the S's, but the car was not positioned in the correct position, kicking up a puff of smoke on the inside of the curb, heading down in through turn 5. 8 minutes left on the clock here, and so we've got some small groups of cars. The question is, how aggressive do people want to be? If you're Charlie Collins, I mean, the answer is pretty simple. It's what we've been talking about for the last 10 minutes or so here, Lewis. Stay calm, drive to the end of this race, and head down pit road to collect your 2 tickets to Munich.
This is what I was going to say earlier, though, was with him running in 3rd place, obviously I would expect that Charlie Collins is going to attack the Team Redline car at some point. I would suspect, obviously, it'll be quite late in the race. And as I was saying earlier, it'll be either an attempt to be like, look, if you can get it, you can get it. If you can't, you can't. Fair enough. Give it a go. Don't take any major risk doing it, though. All dependent on fuel number as well. They did pit a lap before the number 1 car ahead, so a little bit less fuel on board. So obviously, they'll be saving fuel in that scenario. If you're ahead of a car, it's a bit harder to save fuel. So playing all of those numbers out, and also if they were to fight hard earlier in the race, particularly towards about the half an hour mark, there might have been concerns that MSI Esports would have been able to close that gap down. Now they've all sort of been sat there waiting in the slipstream, that gap's actually gone up in a sense. It's now up to 11 seconds to the MSI Esports car behind. In 4th place, Salva Talon's behind the wheel of that one. So this battle for second is very much in their own position. Again, the only real difference between these 2 places is to do with prize money. The ticket will go to VRS Coanda Sim Sports number 81 either way in this scenario, whether it's in 2nd place or 3rd, so it doesn't really matter too much in this scenario. But I do get the vibe that at some point, potentially last lap, potentially penultimate lap, that Charlie Collins might fancy at least an attempt, at least a whiff to try and make something happen.
So we will wait and see. Through the traffic, they duck and dive. 6 minutes left on the clock. An 9-second advantage now for Mitchell de Jong, so that has extended from the just 1.8 that it was coming down into the pit window. De Jong has controlled the second portion of this race. Looking good to secure another victory in the BMW Sim GT Cup. And given what we saw between Rogers and Verstappen, and not just Rogers and Verstappen, but indeed Coanda versus Redline in the early stages of this season, specifically in this competition as well, the BMW Sim GT Cup, my suspicion would be that Charlie Collins is going to be as careful as he can. And if you're right, if he's going to do anything, it will be on the last lap, down into the chicane, so that with MSI Esports 11 seconds behind now, be no risk of the Spaniards picking up the pieces and slotting into a podium and taking those tickets to Munich away from the number 81 car. So Wallmeyer and Vecchio, they won over Yankadea and Verstappen in a drag race at Daytona. At Suzuka, it was Benecke and Benito controlling the race there after various contenders were knocked off of the track. Silverstone, it was the Rogers and de Jong display, and Road Atlanta is proving to be part 2 in what might be a series that we'll get to witness over the course of 2021. Draft being used from Benito, so clearly he's feeling the pressure from behind. Collins and Bootsloop, they can secure their trips to Munich as well. It all comes down to the final 4 minutes, making sure they make no mistakes and getting to the checkered flag is behind them. I think that was Sport Team Competition making a move on one of the Ronin Sim Sport cars that's down 1 lap. We started with 48 cars at this race. Lap number 1, I think, took at least 3 cars victim in terms of retirements, Lewis, but we still have a good 40 cars out there circulating on the track.
Yeah, pretty chaotic opener to the race, and it's been fairly calm from that point until about the midpoint of the race. And then we saw things get a bit crazy. Everything's calmed down once again. I don't blame Enzo Benito for trying to pick up a little bit of slipstream from the lap traffic, because he's definitely feeling the pace from the car behind. Did also see, by the way, that BS Competition, Mikael Gard, has got by on Kova and is now trying to attack David Williams. We're seeing this battle as well a little bit further down the order. It is BS Competition, yeah, with Zenith dropping back. God, they've dropped back so far. Down
into 11th on those older tyres. It gives us an indication of what we can expect maybe later on at the Nürburgring when we see tyre wear being even more important. So from 3rd to 11th in the space of an hour, but it was a gamble worth taking for Ricardo Rico and company. Has just not paid out in his favor. Mikael Gard, by the way, all over now. David Williams in the VRS Coanda, number 18. So top 5 finish on the cards for Gard and his teammate Phil Denez if they can get the move done on the inside into the chicane. Should be fairly easy on fresher rubber. And Williams, some damage to the front left corner of his car as well. Can't fight that one back. So, should be 2 laps to go then. Here comes Mitchell de Jong, using all of the curb on offer at turn 5. 2 more opportunities then for Charlie Collins to get up into 2nd here, Lewis, and take home $1,200 for his team.
Yeah, that's the goal here, is a little bit of prize money up for offer, of course. In their current position, $300 a driver for finishing in 3rd, $600 a driver for finishing in 2nd, and they will be desperate to do so. Charlie Collins approaching the checkered flag. This is, yeah, like you say, not going to have too many opportunities to make it. You said it might come down to the last couple of laps. You can see Enzo Benito running from one side of the circuit back over to the other, just trying to break slipstream, trying to slow down effectively the car behind. Ooh. Charlie Collins is okay with that.
We'll have one more additional lap, Lewis. Sorry, I completely did the math wrong. Across the start-finish line with 90 seconds to go, Mitchell de Jong, 2 laps, and therefore a couple more opportunities, a couple more bites at the apple, if you will, for Collins, who's only 0.2 of a second behind Benito, coming across the start-finish line.
Again, a lap difference on the fuel between these 2 cars. Charlie Collins came in on lap 48. Enzo Benito came in on lap 49. That was the same lap as Mitchell de Jong. So Charlie Collins has had to save fuel throughout this stint. Hopefully there's enough to go to make it a couple of laps. You know they would have communicated that in VRS Coanda. They will be aware that they're going to this point in the race. They are getting that extra lap, so I don't think there'll be any fears in that squad. If I was in one of the other squads, those that pitted, there was a couple that pitted on lap 47. I think there was even a couple that pitted on lap 46. So even a few laps even prior to that. For those, I would be a touch concerned right now, once again to the weaving to try and break that slipstream. Enzo Benito is desperate to hang on. There we go. There's the move again.
So it'll be white flag this time around. Mitchell de Jong already through the final couple of corners to start his final lap here from the Michelin Raceway Road Atlanta. No move forthcoming from Collins for now. One more bite, he will get one more opportunity. But it's already tickets in his hand. Doesn't want to throw those away. Salva Talens is 13 seconds adrift, waiting to pick up the pieces. White flag in the air then here from Road Atlanta for the penultimate round in Season 1 in the BMW Sim GT Cup. Mitchell de Jong looking good for a 2nd consecutive victory, but eyes focused on his teammate in his quest to challenge Enzo Benito. Down through the S's, we jump on board with the young Welshman. Recently joined up with Coanda after qualifying for the World Championships in the winter as part of the German Sim RC outfit. He has been a revelation at the top level of sim racing so far. Very strong competitor in the World Championship. Now focuses on the second half of the year and what is forthcoming. On to the back straightaway. Mitchell de Jong already halfway down this one, looking to try and take the checkered flag with no challenge there. Here comes the draft. Here comes the ducking and diving. Benito wants to hold on. And we will wait and see how close it is going to be. Out of the final corner then, Mitchell de Jong for the second time in a row tastes victory in the BMW Sim GT Cup. Tickets already secured to Munich in December. It'll be $1,200 in the pocket for him and his teammate. Under the bridge we go. Not close enough for the Welshman Charlie Collins. Benito holds on to second, but the tickets to Munich go to Coanda, and now they've bounced back after domination from Redline in the first 2 rounds. It's been Coanda jumping back. 2 cars now secured in our Sim Live finale in December, Lewis, and it's very much shaping up to be a battle of the best.
Yeah, great battle there towards the end of the race. Benito just able to hang on from Charlie Collins, but applied as much pressure as possible and saved the fuel to reach the checkered flag. A fantastic race, and once again, seeing VRS Coanda going toe-to-toe with Team Redline. But when we head to that final race of this season, when we head to the Nürburgring in a couple of weeks' time, I think MSI Esports, I think BS Competition might have something to say about that when they head there, because if you throw something random strategically out there, I reckon it is the perfect opportunity to try and sneak your way to Munich.
Look at the chaos as well across the line further back in the pack. RAG 14th and 15th, just a tenth of a second separating them at the line. Interesting race, not necessarily the most chaotic after the lap 1 mess that we saw. Lots of passing, lots of strategy. And Road Atlanta once more delivers an exciting, enthralling race. One more round from the Nürburgring. It won't be publicly available. 16 invited teams with 2 trips to Munich on the line. Will it be Redline? Will it be Coanda? Or can someone else join them at the top of BMW Virtual Motorsport? Still waiting for the final couple of cars to come across the start-finish line. Lewis, I want to get a reaction from you here. This M8 has produced some very intriguing racing, I think, over the course of these first 4 rounds. 16 cars, it will be a slightly different type of an affair next time. But we say goodbye, I think, or we start saying goodbye to this car, and looking forward to the M4. Very different type of a race that, like you said earlier, but it's going to be just as close and just as competitive.
It's going to be very, very tight in that car. Some teams have gotten to grips with the M4 GT3 already from having raced it elsewhere, and see what advantages they have when we come to that second season, the second half of this year. Still another opportunity for people to take advantage of this car if they're feeling strong in it. Although that said, if I was in a team that isn't Coanda right now, I am feeling a little bit concerned, because they are getting stronger and stronger as these races have gone on through this season.
Well, let's go ahead then and take a look at our unofficial race results. It is de Jong for the second time in a row tasting victory, this time at the Michelin Raceway Road Atlanta. Almost 10 seconds is the gap to Enzo Benito in the number 1 Team Redline Red. A close pursuit with Charlie Collins. Takes third, and $600 for the team, but also the tickets to Munich. Sal Vitalin's in 4th in the 474. Late charge hit for him on those fresher tires. Might have been wondering what he could have done if the strategy had played out slightly differently. Mikkel Gard, another charge through the field on 4 tires in the second half of this race. The Big Blue Machine rounds out the top 5 with David Williams, Matti Siepola, Dylan Shrevens, Ryan Barneveld, and Martin van Luzenoord completing the top 10. Ricardo Rico and Josh Thompson 11th and 12th, with the gaggle of cars that we saw coming across the line. Lorenzo Colombo, Elliot Veyron, Valentin Mandernack, Andreas Jokenschim, Johan Hart, and then Johan Royer all completing the race on the lead lap here today. It was Sven Haase, Rodrigo Fluker, the first of the cars going 1 lap down. We did see Sven Haase off-tracking it through the final quarter in the closing stages of the race. Elias Sapanen, Joop de Ligt, Ricardo Ferreira, Mike Wagner, Andrew Karen 21st through 25th, with RSR by G Performance, Pure Sims Esports, Cube Racing, Ronin Simsport, and RSR, a second car, completing the top 30. William Chadwick, Lucas Lippert, Nico Werbicki in the Bustamentos car, so a bit of a multinational, multicultural affair there in the 25. United Simsports, Alexander Davidson drops to 34th late in the race after gambling and also not taking tires. Scroll through the rest of the field, trying to queue up as well now, Lewis. A brief look at the lap 1 chaos and calamity, because it very much influenced the rest of this race. Lots of contenders, including from Williams Esports, getting mixed up very early on.
Yeah, it shaped the beginning of it. We saw similar sort of stuff at Silverstone, where we had Josh Rogers on pole position. That day he was alongside Max Benneker on the front row. Of course, today Alejandro Sanchez was the driver on the front row alongside. But it was VRS Coanda getting involved in the mix and getting up into second position in the early stages, which really allowed Josh Rogers to shape that start of the race. You had that incident as well, which just sort of kind of caused a bit of a calamitous affair, and Dane Warren was into the barrier before we even got a few laps into the race. One team that I want to say a good thing about in this race, MSI Esports, I like the risk of trying to take 4 tyres. A little concerned about their pace towards the end of the race, but Alejandro Sanchez over the start of the race, I mean, yeah, sure, there was a lot of fuel saving coming from Josh Rogers, but I get the feeling that Alejandro Sanchez, MSI Esports, they mean business in this championship, and they are a team that I would not count out.
And a team as well that I think very much enjoy the challenge of the M8, and so heading into the Nürburgring, be interesting to watch them there. Trying to take one more look at these slow-mo shots from the start of this race, Lewis. It was the 12 of RHE Jr. that I think started the chain reaction. It was contact slightly on the inside line, though, between Bila and Sport Team Competition that I think begun the chain reaction, and then the cork in the bottle got set off, and, well, I think 7 or 8 cars all getting mixed up. Significant damage to a few of them. This really could have been so much worse.
I think so. This comes a little bit courtesy of them all being spread out so much. Watch them coming over the crest, and they are all very, very spread out before even that point, which allows some drivers to accelerate more. And obviously the concertina effect, everyone just closes up and it all just gets spilt all over the racetrack in the most unfortunate way possible. See how close those cars are ahead? It's one of those things that's kind of natural going into a blind corner. A bit of a shame to start the race in that way, but boy oh boy, towards the middle point in that race, was it a bit of a thrill ride through that middle bit.
Well, I guess with that, it's time to say goodbye for the penultimate time this season. We will be back in a couple of weeks' time with the season finale in this BMW M8 GTE. 16 of the best sim racing teams will do battle with 2 more trips left to Munich on the line. Can join myself, Arjuna Kankipati, and Lewis McLeod for that action here live on RaceSpotTV and across of BMW social media. But if you want to stay involved with RaceSpot and all the great sim racing series that we get to cover, reminder to follow us for all of your sim racing action at RaceSpotTV across of YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you're not already subscribed to us on YouTube, to hit that red button and the bell next to it to get notified every single time we go live with a great sim racing series that we get to cover. For now, though, it's Coanda Simsport once more in victory lane as Mitchell de Jong and Joshua Rogers celebrate victory here from the Michelin Raceway Road Atlanta. Redline and Coanda, they both have 2 teams already in our BMW Sim Live finale in December. Lots more action to go, though, on the road to Munich, and you can catch it all live on RaceSpot and BMW Motorsport. My name is Arjuna, I've been joined by the wonderful Lewis McLeod, and I'll see you next time for more BMW Motorsports action.